Chapter 226. Zhu Shiyao was so powerful, so why should Wang Lu be the lead disciple? Hai Yunfan poked at the hemorrhoid, sore problem, so Wang Lu had no choice but to confess the truth. Of course it's because of my wisdom and beauty. After writing, the other side of the letter was silent for a long time. The letter wrinkled a few times as if it had been vigorously kneaded, and then stretched out. On the surface, Hai Yunfan's neat handwriting reappeared. Back to the main topic? No one is stopping you from getting back to the main topic. I never encouraged you to talk about the lead disciple. Brother Wang really has a deep resentment, haha, but let's talk about the main topic. It's just that, before the main topic we still need some background foreshadowing. Here's the thing, Hai Yunfan spared no expense to carry out a strictly confidential correspondence with Wang Lu. Of course, it was not to make fun of his lead disciple qualification. Next, Hai Yunfan briefly narrated the experience of the 7 of them exploring the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region 1.5 months ago. Wang Lu was also quite interested in this. The news of the ancient Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region had spread throughout the 9 regions, and the heroes of the world had gathered. How did Zhu Shiyao stand out from the crowd? This experience would certainly give Wang Lu a lot of useful reference. At that time, there were more than 2,000 cultivators around the ancient Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region. Excluding some miscellaneous small sects that came to join in the fun and try their luck, there were hundreds of cultivators that were worth paying attention to. In addition to the elite disciples of the younger generation of the major sects, some of the old antiques were unwilling to be left out. This Sword Tomb may not be attractive to the Unity Stage cultivators, but at that time, there were 3 Deity Stage cultivators, as well as hundreds of Yuanying Stage and King Pill Stage cultivators, which was truly spectacular. However, for our 10,000 Arts sect, the old antiques are actually not that scary. They are too old and outdated. If it's a survival hunting situation, perhaps we are not their opponent, but in this kind of ancient site exploration they have no advantage. The ones worth paying attention to were the elites of the younger generation. I presume that Brother Wang also knows that ever since the Great Change 20 years ago, heroes have appeared in large numbers on the continent. In addition to the 5 uniques, there are also some other sects that often have outstanding core disciples. These people have luck on their bodies and their strength and intelligence are all first-rate in the world. They can often create miracles and trample on some of the older cultivators. At that time, in front of the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region, there were 30 or 40 such cultivators. But to be honest, in our eyes, most of the so-called heroes are just SOSO. The ones who are really worth paying attention to are the disciples of the 5 uniques. At that time, we received the news that, in addition to 10,000 Arts sect, the elite disciples of Spirit Sword sect and Kunlun sect also came to the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region. Our martial brothers and sisters were gearing up for a fight, thinking that we could compete with Brother Wang and senior sister Lu Li. However, unexpectedly, we didn't see the shadow of Lingjian school. Instead, we fought with senior sister Zhou Mumu and the others from Kunlun sect. Kunlun sect is indeed worthy to be the ancestral land of the immortal path. Senior sister Zhou's strength is outstanding, in no way inferior to senior sister Lu Li. However, big brother Zai fought with her 3 times, 2 wins and 1 loss, so he still had a small upper hand. Seeing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but say, "Do you have any shame? Zhou Mumu lost to Zhan Zai, yet you still have the nerve to evaluate her as the same level as Lu Li? Did you forget that a few years ago, Zhan Zai came to the mountain to challenge Lu Li and was beaten into a dog's head? On behalf of all the people in the world, I despise your 10,000 Arts sect." Ah, Brother Wang, you don't know. At that time, after senior brother Zai's closed-door training, his cultivation base broke through to Shudan stage. He thought that victory was already in his grasp, but unexpectedly he was still no match for senior sister Lu Li's brilliant sword heart. At that time when he returned to the mountain, his heart was like dead ashes. All day long he kept saying that he was going to be alone for the rest of his life. However, unexpectedly when he was disheartened he actually saw through the barrier of love and achieved 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength skyrocketed. According to the professional analysis of the 10,000 Arts sect, even if senior sister Lu Li has a low-level Shudan stage cultivation base, it would still be difficult for her to contend against senior brother Zai's 10,000 motionless immortal heart. Wang Lu was inexplicably astonished. Preposterous. How come I don't know that there are such benefits to being lovelorn? What? Does nothing continue? Actually, Brother Wang, you don't have to worry about it. Each of us has our own immortal path, and the rhythm of our immortal cultivation is different. Some of us are faster at this time, some of us are faster at that time. Now, it just so happens that it's my 10,000 Arts Sect's disciples' turn to cultivate a bit faster. In short, we have fought a few rounds with the people of Kunlun Immortal Sect, and gained a small advantage. However, when the gate of the Sword Tomb is opened, no one has the mind to fight with each other anymore. Every ancient sword tomb that can survive from the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos to the present day has a huge magical ability. Even the current leader of the immortal cultivation path, Hichu Daorin, would not dare to face it head-on. Therefore, when the sword tomb is opened, no matter how many contradictions there are, they have to temporarily put aside and go all out to enter the sword tomb. The first level of the sword tomb is the Sumeru mustard seed space. When the gate of the sword tomb was opened, our original group of more than 2,000 people, in the blink of an eye, only 300 people were left. Those small fries who came to join in the fun were simply isolated outside. Later, I heard that they dug 3 feet into the ground, but they still couldn't find any clue of the sword tomb. The originally vast sword tomb seemed to have disappeared. Wang Lu pondered and wrote, "Disappeared? The main body of the sword tomb is not in the southern heaven region?" Later, our analysis was like this. The southern heaven region is just the entrance to the sword tomb. The main body is in a space that is beyond our imagination. That space allows people to leave but not to enter. If you feel that it is difficult to survive, you can use your own spells to escape, but once you go out, you can never come back. However, at that time, when we just entered the first level, everyone was in high spirits and no one intended to give up. And the first level of the sword tomb was indeed not difficult. After we were teleported in, our hearts flashed a flash of understanding. We realized that as long as we find 3 golden grasses in a vast grassland, we will be teleported to the next level. Later, someone accidentally found the golden grasses and found that as long as they touched them, they would dissolve into the body and could not be preserved. Therefore, there is no space for us to compete with each other. And the sword tomb indeed does not encourage us to fight in this level. On the grassland there are strange misty creatures. Once they find a fight, they will rush up and wrap around the person who started the fight. No matter how hard they struggle, they can't break free. After a while they will disappear. Moreover, they are not teleported out of the sword tomb, but they will disappear without a trace. Most likely they are dead. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Invisible killing, the haze is really terrible. Therefore, the most important thing in the first level is how to find the golden grasses. The grassland is vast and boundless, but looking for golden grasses is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Our group of hundreds of people searched the grassland for a whole day, but only a few people found a golden grasses, and without exception, all of them were young cultivators. Those deity-stage Taoist supremes have great magical abilities, but in the sword tomb, they couldn't display them. Instead, they were faintly repelled. One of them clearly saw a golden grass, but when he went forward to pick it, the color of the golden grass faded. Wang Lu commented, "They're probably afraid that the old man will cheat them." In short, according to our analysis, this level is a test of a cultivator's luck and affinity. And this is the advantage of young cultivators. Our luck is much better than that of the old man. In addition to this, it depends on other aspects of ability. On the grassland we can't fight, so we can't display our fighting strength. However, our deduction technique and daily knowledge are not prohibited. We soon realized that if we don't have heaven-defying luck, we have to use our brains if we want to collect 3 golden grasses. And in this regard, our 10,000 Arts sect is undoubtedly the most advantageous. Under the leadership of eldest brother, the 7 of us launched our great divination technique. Starting from the previous location where we picked up the golden grasses, we analyzed the terrain, soil, air, and other factors to determine the location of the golden grasses. Although we can't do it very accurately, we can greatly reduce the search range. Other people like Senior Sister Zhou of Kunlun Immortal Sect also made a deduction, but their algorithm is obviously not as advanced as ours. Therefore, in 3 days, we were able to collect enough golden grasses for our group of 7 people, while their group of 6 people were still missing 1 golden grasses. It is said that none of the old Yuanying stage and above could find 3 golden grasses. Their primordial spirit is powerful, and their computing power is strong, but their algorithm is backward. Moreover, their adaptability is too poor, and they simply don't know how to adjust their calculation method. However, after entering the second level, we realized that the design of the first level is to a large extent a kind of protection. Without enough computing and adaptability, without enough luck, entering the second level is simply courting death. The second level is in a pitch-black space, where no matter what kind of spell we cast, we can't see anything. Moreover, we're surrounded by murderous spirit. There's a very vicious monster that, once you get within 30 feet of it, it will pounce on you and corrode you into a pool of pus. Moreover, it's very sensitive to primordial spirit. Once you're touched by the primordial spirit, it will endlessly chase you. In such a space we have to find the key to the next level. We can only rely on our hearing, touch, smell, as well as our computing ability. The position and movement of the monster have a regular pattern. If we can calculate it in advance, we can pass through their encirclement. However, this also requires an extremely brilliant computing ability as well as luck. Because there are illusions everywhere in this space, which greatly interferes with our information collection, it's impossible to pass this level by relying on our 10,000 Arts sect people alone. After several attempts, even Senior Sister Yi Feifei was almost killed. Later on, when Senior Sister Zhou Mumu and the others arrived, we put aside our previous grudges and began to cooperate, barely passing. And the third level is even more difficult. Fortunately, our two sects have joined forces, and our strength is not the same as before, so we stumbled through it. After the third level, we finally arrived at the key point of this experiential learning, the hidden treasure of the Sword Tomb. The result is really unexpected. Wang Lu could almost hear Hai Yunfan's helpless sigh. I thought the difficulty of the last level was the distribution of benefits with Kunlun Immortal Sect. However, in terms of strength, 10,000 Arts Sect is a bit stronger, so I was still full of confidence. However, unexpectedly, when we opened the door of the hidden treasure, we saw your sect's senior sister Zhu Shiyao holding the ancient spiritual treasure sword, completing the last sacrificial refining. I can understand your mood. Hai Yunfan's sorrowful handwriting floated up, 20 years of childhood sweethearts, separated through the fire of war, parents making things difficult for them and so on. After untold hardships, they finally came together, bowed to the heaven and earth, worshipped their parents, and entered the bridal chamber only to find that the bride was pressed down by a strange man on the bed. Can you really understand this kind of mood? Little Hai, your 10,000 motionless immortal heart should have reached the large success stage, haha. My immortal heart is almost broken. Moreover, my immortal heart is not a cuckold. Aha, in short, what happened then? Then, of course, we were indignant, so we joined hands to subdue her and snatch the ancient sword, but unexpectedly, more than 10 of our two sects' elite people were actually defeated by her sword. Although at that time, everyone was exhausted and only 3 to 5% of them were left, but it really made people speechless. Seeing this, Wang Lu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. One sword strike defeated more than 10 elites of the 5 uniques? This was really King against the heaven. Big senior sister, do you have to be so powerful? Little Hai, you specifically wrote to me to condemn Zhu Shiyao's despicable and shameless act of stealing the treasure? Hai Yunfan wrote, exploring the sword tomb depended on one's own ability and luck. We couldn't compete with her. Although we were not happy, we were willing to concede defeat. As disciples of the 5 uniques, we still have this little bit of tolerance. What I want to talk about is the next question. At that time, Zhu Shiyao defeated all of us and floated away. We rested for a moment, and when we were about to return, we found out that the ancient sword tomb was not only 3 layers, there was also a heavenly cave below. In fact, the size of the entire ancient sword tomb was much larger than we originally expected. What we saw at that time was the tip of the iceberg, which was enough to frighten people. I'm afraid that the high-rank ancient sword that Zhu Shiyao took away was only a trivial plaything in the sword tomb, and the big guy is still hidden deeper. This level of ancient ruins is rarely seen in the immortal cultivation world for many years. At present, 10,000 Arts Sect and Kunlun Sect are strictly confidential. As for Lingjian School, since Zhu Shiyao can explore the 3rd layer, this matter can't be hidden from you. Not to mention, with the mysteriousness of the ancient sword tomb, none of us can handle it alone, so we can only join hands. Therefore, I wrote a letter in advance inviting you to join us in exploring the deeper layer of the sword tomb. I know that your sect's elders will soon make a decision, but whether you want to participate or not, it's the action of your Lingjian school. On the premise that it doesn't violate the principle, I personally invite you. Brother Wang, let's join hands. Wang Lu pondered for a moment and then wrote, Little Hai, you are a good person. Chapter 227. After understanding the whole story of Little Hai's adventure through the shadow letter, it was not difficult for Wang Lu to understand why he was so eager to write him this letter. The setting of the first 3 levels of the ancient sword tomb gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He believed that Little Hai also experienced this feeling, so he immediately thought of him. I still remember Brother Wang's world-shaking one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village 10 years ago, which is simply unprecedented. Presumably, Brother Wang has a unique talent for this kind of level design. In the ancient sword tomb, A cultivator's magical power and even their fighting ability are secondary, but the ability to break the level design is the most important. If I can get Brother Wang's help, I believe I will be successful in every endeavor. Little Hai was really a talkative person. Some words were very important, but he deliberately avoided saying them. Because there was simply no need to say it, Wang Lu would certainly think of it. Cooperation was a win-win situation. Wang Lu's ability to break the level was so powerful, so the 10,000 Art sect would naturally get great benefits from the cooperation. But what about Wang Lu? What were the benefits of Wang Lu? Little Hai didn't say it because he knew that Wang Lu would definitely think of it. 5 years ago, the 10,000 Art sect's visit to the Spirit Sword Mountain was indeed somewhat embarrassing. However, the strength of the 10,000 Art sect would not be dim because of this. In terms of calculation ability alone, no cultivator in the world could be compared to the people of the 10,000 Art sect. Previously, when the two sects exchanged information, Wang Lu's vision was also broadened. He repeatedly praised them as the Yellow Ridge people of the immortal cultivation world. And in the ever-changing situation of the ancient sword tomb, this kind of powerful calculation ability was necessary. In this world, there was no professional adventurer who could be successful in every endeavor. Wang Lu's one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village was also based on a lot of calculation. Cooperating with the 10,000 Arts sect could save him a lot of energy. Moreover, according to Hai Yunfan, now that he had comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, his strength had skyrocketed to the extent that he could fight against Lu Li. He could be considered as a qualified teammate. Of course, no matter how Hai Yunfan praised Wang Lu and described the future of the cooperation between the two parties in an extravagant manner, it could not erase a simple fact. The risk of exploring the ancient sword tomb was extremely high. According to the previous description, the risk of every level in the ancient sword tomb increased. In the first level, the sword tomb even intentionally protected the intruders, but in the second level it began to kill them. The third level was even more difficult, so if one was determined to explore deeper, although the benefits would be greater, they would also have to face greater risks. Was there a need for Wang Lu to take such a risk? With his natural endowment and background, there was absolutely no need for him to be impatient for success. If he cultivated honestly, his future would still be boundless. Moreover, he didn't have the hatred of killing his father or stealing his wife, so why bother? So when Hai Yunfan emphasized on Zhu Shiyao, he was actually providing an answer to this question. Of course it was necessary. Because a mountain cannot contain two tigers. You Wang Lu, the dignified lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, how do you compare with Zhu Shiyao? With her around, how much of your reputation as the chief disciple will remain? So, if you want to maintain your dignity, what should you do? No matter how much controversy there was about Wang Lu, based on Hai Yunfan's understanding of Wang Lu from a big point of view, he was an upright and candid person. In the face of this kind of situation, he certainly wouldn't suppress his opponent, but rather make himself stronger. On the immortal cultivation path, the most taboo was to be impatient for success. However, if one really wanted to advance by leaps and bounds, there was still a way to find the immortal fate. What was the immortal fate? The Ripple Dream in the green lake of Grand Cloud Mountain was an excellent immortal fate. And in the ancient sword tomb, of course, it also contained the immortal fate. If Wang Lu wanted to overwhelm Zhu Shiyao, step-by-step immortal cultivation was absolutely not enough. This is very good, but are you the one who has the final say? Wang Lu had his own plan, but the issue that needed to be confirmed must be confirmed in writing. Rest assured, if there is no elder's approval, how could I dare to make my own decision? This is the seal. A complex pattern appeared on the shadow letter paper. Wang Lu looked at it and tentatively approved it. Then, when the official document from 10,000 Arts sect arrives, after our Heavenly Sword Hall has made a decision, if there is no problem, we can start the cooperation. I wish you a happy cooperation. When Wang Lu finished writing the last word, all the handwriting on the shadow letter paper disappeared, and the magical power on the paper dried up, turning it into an ordinary letter paper. The correspondence with Hai Yunfan could only reach a preliminary cooperation intention, and the detailed content had to be discussed at an opportune time. After all, such a big matter couldn't be ignored. After Wang Lu put down the shadow letter paper, his heart gradually stirred. He thought that after coming back from the Grand Cloud Mountain, he could settle down for 1 or 2 years, but he probably couldn't rest for that long. Whether it was the pressure from Zhu Shiyao or the great era that his master said, it made Wang Lu's heart eager to give it a try. Ancient Sword Tomb? I hope it won't disappoint me. Far away in the eastern border region, on a stone platform surrounded by gentle breeze and gentle water, Hai Yunfan gently put down his pen, stretched out his hand, and pulled out the magical power from the shadow letter paper, thus destroying this expensive prop. Then a questioning voice came from behind him. "What's the reply from Wang Lu?" Hai Yunfan said with a smile. "It's done," he agreed. Turning his head, he saw the eldest brother of 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai, gently standing in a clear pool. His toes set off ripples on the surface of the pool. Upon hearing Hai Yunfan's answer, Zhan Zai was slightly surprised. "That's straightforward." Hai Yunfan shrugged. "It seems that the pressure from Zhu Shiyao is not small." When it came to Zhu Shiyao, not only Wang Lu was under a lot of pressure, Zhan Zai's figure also sank a bit, and the clear pool rippled. "Damn it, what the hell is wrong with that abnormal monster?" Thinking of the sword technique that was broken by her in the ancient sword tomb, Zhan Zai could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. If she was present during the last sect exchange, we wouldn't have been able to do anything. Thinking of that fiasco that happened in a flash, Hai Yunfan couldn't help but sigh. I hope that this exploration of the ancient sword tomb can have a good enough harvest. However, with Zhu Shiyao's strong sword sense, the Lingjian school will certainly send her to explore. Even if we add Wang Lu, we may not. How could there be a reason to be afraid before the fight? Well, since Wang Lu has agreed, let's go back to the sect leader. With that, Zhan Zai stretched out his hand to summon a thunderbolt, which then wrapped him and Hai Yunfan. With a flash of lightning, they had already left the place where Hai Yunfan cultivated at the Gentle Breeze waterfall. The 10,000 Arts sect was not a lone peak like the Spirit Sword Mountain. Instead, it occupied an extremely vast area with mountains, rivers, jungles and hills, and its interior was divided into many blocks. Zhan Zai took Hai Yunfan across a rushing river, across a misty lake, and then stopped at a plain. They then flew straight up, breaking through the clouds. Above the clouds, there was a huge wheel that blotted out the sky, as if it was the ruler of the sky, overlooking the earth. In the middle of the wheel, a young cultivator sat cross-legged. In his hand, there was a quaint bamboo brush that absorbed the starry night sky, which was like a thick ink. He wrote in the void without stopping. Every time the tip of the brush danced, it would trigger a mysterious force, which left a corresponding mark on the wheel behind the cultivator. After Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan pierced through the clouds, they converged the lightning and entered through an entrance at the edge of the wheel. Then they respectfully walked on the side road that supported the outline of the wheel. The feeling under their feet was neither metal nor wood. Every time they took a step, it would trigger a burst of light, which reflected a piece of writing. Along the way, the two of them had left a long trail of light behind them. However, the cultivator that was far away in the horizon never came close, which inevitably made people wonder whether this huge wheel was boundless or not. However, the two of them were already familiar with this process, so they were not impatient and just patiently moved forward. Before long, the scene in front of them changed, and the cultivator that was far away in the horizon suddenly appeared in front of them. At this time, when they took the last step, the words under their feet just happened to form an article. Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan, as if by prior agreement, bowed in salute. "Greetings, sect leader." The young cultivator sitting on the cloud treasure wheel was the famous sect leader of 10,000 Arts sect in 9 regions, Supreme Tianluan. Supreme Tianluan had been cultivating for more than 1,700 years, and now his cultivation base had reached the peak of Unity stage, only a few steps away from the Deshang stage. He was one of the top 5 peerless powerhouses in the Wanxian League, a senior who was admired and respected by countless people. It was just that few people knew that the real body of Supreme Tianluan looked like a young man in his 20s or 30s, which contained an amazing vitality and did not seem to decay in the slightest. As Supreme Tianluan himself said, knowledge would never decay. Seeing Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan, Supreme Tianluan didn't stop writing, nor did he move his head. He just lightly said, "I see. Since he intends to cooperate, then that's the best. You two go find junior brother Tsang Wu to prepare the official document. When everything is ready, you can leave." Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan responded in unison. "As for your question, Zai, my opinion is to treat each other with sincerity. 10,000 Arts sect has pride, and foolish people are not qualified to walk with us. However, since you have personally experienced and recognized the Lingjian school 5 years ago, then treat each other with sincerity. Those who seek knowledge should be open-minded, so don't worry too much." "Yes." The second question is, this exploration will not have the help of your seniors. I don't care what the other sects do, there will not be a Taoist master of 10,000 Arts sect. It's not that I'm arrogant, but it's not necessary. Through the first 3 tests, this sword tomb is most likely the tomb of inheritance from the ancient times, which was born in response to the change in the providence of heaven and earth. Before the arrival of the Great Era, it supported the predestined people and left its own inheritance, not for the greedy. In simple terms, if you want to get the real treasure in the sword tomb, there are roughly 4 requirements: young age, solid foundation, strong plasticity, and predestined people. Specifically, under 40 years old, Shudan stage or above, high-grade spirit root, and unsolidified primordial spirit. Also, recognize the idea of the master of the sword tomb, and be recognized by the master of the sword tomb. The last point is difficult to grasp, but the first few are very standard conditions. At present, only cultivators below the Taoist master of 10,000 arts sect can meet these conditions, so there's no need to waste manpower. Although you guys haven't cultivated for a long time, and your cultivation is not high, it's time for you to take charge. If you can't do anything without the help of your seniors, then you're not worthy to be a disciple of my 10,000 arts sect. When you encounter difficulties, use your brain more and remember that knowledge is power. Zhan Zai looked very serious. Yes. The third question is about your doubt, Yunfan. My answer is that it doesn't matter even if you fail. On the contrary, protecting yourself is more important than anything else. The 9 regions is big and Dixian is everywhere. Not to mention, before the world changes, you guys have the capital to fail. Moreover, experiencing 1 or 2 failures is a good thing for you. Didn't Zai cultivate the 10,000 motionless immortal heart because of this? I know that many people in the 10,000 arts sect think that my idea is too conservative or even too cowardly. Indeed, as the sect leader of the 10,000 arts sect, I don't have the spirit that a person of the 10,000 arts sect should have. Compared to the brilliant geniuses in the 10,000 arts sect, I'm just a scholar with a librarian background. However, after 1,000 years, those brilliant people have died, but I have survived. Speaking to this, Supreme Tianluan slightly stopped writing and smiled. Of course, whether you want to shine or live a long life, the choice is in your hands. Chapter 228. On the stellar peak of Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region, the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect, Feng Yin Taoist master, and his disciple Zhu Shiyao, sat opposite each other in the bamboo room. 2 cups of tea were placed between the two of them. The water vapor in the cup slowly rose, which set off the tranquil and comfortable atmosphere in the bamboo room, if one did not consider the row of Heavenly Sword Hall elders who were standing in the bamboo room. After a long time, Feng Yin, who was somewhat uncomfortable being stared at by his junior brother and sister, finally opened his mouth to break the silence. Tell us in detail about your experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region. Zhu Shiyao, who has never been good at talking, calmly agreed. Then the woman suddenly stood up and made a sword move. Her movement was as smooth as flowing water. The bamboo room suddenly lit up with starry light. Countless sharp sword chi stabbed toward the sect leader. The sharp sword intent seemed like it wanted to cut him into pieces. However, how could a deity stage cultivator be easily hurt by it? The starry sword chi hit the sect leader's body, bursting out dazzling sparks. However, it couldn't even hurt the sect leader's clothes and skin. The sect leader's expression remained unchanged. He picked up the teacup and slightly nodded. So that's how it is. It's indeed an unexpected result. With that, Feng Yin fell into contemplation. As for Zhu Shiyao, she took a deep breath and then calmly sat back, picked up the teacup and gently sipped the tea. The bamboo room was restored to its tranquility. After a long time. What the hell, you two can speak human language? Standing on the side, the 5th elder finally could not bear it anymore. She took a few steps forward and slapped the wooden table. Are you showing off your foreign language skills? Feng Yin Taoist master was startled, and then apologetically said, I forgot that you don't understand sword language. For Feng Yin and Zhu Shiyao, the most convenient way to communicate was with the sword. There were thousands of words in the heart, but they didn't need to resort to the mouth. When the sword was swung, all the thoughts were poured into it. Could be said that it was convenient and fast. Moreover, it was also in line with the identity of a sword cultivator. However, to be able to communicate through the sword intent, one must have a sharp enough sword sense, which meant that one's talent in the way of the sword must be at the peak. And among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, not everyone could meet this condition. In that case, let me briefly explain Yang Er's experience and my own analysis. Feng Yin Taoist master put down the teacup and pondered for a moment. Yang Er's experience was very simple. While the others entered the sword catacomb through the main entrance and fought their way through, Yang Er found a small path and directly entered the treasure room to retrieve the ancient sword. Then she swaggered off. What kind of godly development is this? The 5th elder was simply inexplicably shocked. After going through the war, separation, parents making things difficult for you and other hardships, you finally got married to your childhood sweetheart of 20 years, only to find out that she was pregnant with someone else's child when you entered the bridal chamber? If you must use this kind of vulgar explanation, then it's like this. Feng Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He then shook his head and said, therefore the 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect allied forces that went through untold hardships to break into the treasure room tried to intercept Yao in a flustered and exasperated manner. Unfortunately, Yao had just finished refining the ancient sword, and her sword momentum was at its peak. Although they had a large number of people, they were already exhausted after passing through 3 levels. Moreover, the fire in their heart was too exuberant, so they lost their calm state of mind. Under Yao sword, they were full of flaws. Not being able to catch the adulterer, they were beaten instead, really inhumane. The 5th elder gloated. The youngest among them, Hua Yun, asked, will there be any trouble? After all, they have suffered a big loss. Feng Yin said, the exploration of the sword catacomb depends on one's own chance. Yao didn't use any despicable tricks. It can only be said that everyone has their own chance. The sword catacomb in the southern heaven region is the tomb of inheritance from ancient times. This time, it came into being because it sensed the change in the world's providence and resuscitation from the void to find a suitable successor. This kind of inheritance tomb usually has 2 kinds of methods, similar to our immortal cultivation sect's disciple recruitment. The first kind is to meet the rigid standards, age, plasticity, cultivation philosophy, that is, to pass through many tests. As long as one can pass the test, they can take the corresponding treasure. The second kind is to have a predestined relationship with the treasure in the tomb and get the direct recognition of the treasure. This way they can skip all the tests and directly take the treasure. The first kind is actually a necessary supplement to the second kind. If the sword catacomb can't find a particularly suitable object that can directly pass the inheritance, the regular test will be opened and the participants will pass through the test. Feng He said, is this the difference between the immortal gathering and the elder's legacy? Wang Wu said with a smile, that is to say, if you can't find a suitable person in free love, then you have to obediently go on a blind date. In short, the reason why Yao can go straight in, avoid all the tests and directly take the ancient sword, is because the ancient sword spirit thinks that Yao is a predestined person, so it opened the back door of the sword catacomb for her. Otherwise, no matter how good Yao's stellar sword scripture is, it is impossible to violate the rules of the sword catacomb. Lu Xian was quite pleased and nodded to Zhu Shiyao, so that's how it is. I really congratulate Yao for obtaining this immortal fate. Lu Li frowned, senior brother, there is a problem here. If Yao and the ancient sword are predestined, then why did the sword catacomb open the normal test procedure and let other cultivators enter the tomb? The other elders were taken aback. Feng Yin's face also sank and said seriously, this is the problem I want to talk about next. The size of the sword catacomb is much larger than expected. This is an unprecedented ancient ruin, which is probably left by a true immortal before the age of chaos. The ancient sword that Yao took is only the outer treasure, which is not worth mentioning compared to the core treasure in the deeper part. So even if Yao takes the ancient sword, it will not affect the normal operation of the sword catacomb. The Heavenly Sword Hall elders were extremely shocked. Lu Xian's voice trembled as he said in disbelief, the inheritance of a true immortal? In this era there is still the inheritance of a true immortal? Don't tell me the age of chaos didn't make them all disappear? This is a big academic discovery. The 5th elder scolded, academic my ass. This is money. Lu Li also rarely nodded in agreement with the 5th sister's point of view. Yes, if the top-ranked spiritual treasure is only the outer treasure, then most likely it is the inheritance of a true immortal. There must be an immortal weapon inside, most likely a true immortal weapon. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's priceless. Moreover, it's in Xingjing Immortal City. The value of such a sword catacomb is comparable to that of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. But senior brother, is this news true? Feng Yin said, when Yao communicated with the ancient sword spirit, at least the deeper existence has been confirmed. Unfortunately, the sword spirit has been sleeping for nearly 10,000 years, so she has lost too much of her memory. Moreover, she was sealed not long after she was born, so she knows very little. Otherwise, with the ancient sword in Yao hand, our Lingjian school has an incomparable advantage. Wang Wu sneered. But other people may not know this. I'm afraid at this time, Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect are gnashing their teeth in envy and jealousy. Feng Yin disagreed. This kind of sword catacomb even Xingjing Sect alone can't handle it. Several sects cooperating is inevitable. Moreover, once we gain something from the sword catacomb, our information advantage will be wiped out. Therefore, there's no need to have such a strong hostility. I estimate that it won't be long before the documents from 10,000 Arts Sect and Kunlun Immortal Sect arrive. At that time, we need to take it seriously. The several elders had their own ideas, but this kind of big matter was naturally decided by the sect leader. Senior brother, what are you going to do? Feng Yin said, there are two sets of plans. The first is to use the entire sect to develop the sword catacomb. The rule of the sword catacomb is to find young, malleable cultivators to inherit the legacy. In ancient times, the surrounding spiritual energy is rich, so the heart standard is much higher than now. In Lingjian school, I'm afraid only Yao Wang Lu, and Lu Li, these few people are qualified to participate. Therefore, the three of them naturally have to take action. Other suitable candidates can also participate. At the same time, us old guys can't just sit around. Although the sword catacomb won't let us in, we can support Yao and the others from outside the sword catacomb in all aspects. As a last resort, we can even break the sword catacomb. The advantage of this plan is that the risk is relatively small. Regardless of the rules of the sword catacomb, it is, after all, a dead thing from 10,000 years ago. With the cooperation of the three sects elders, the risk is always lower than letting Yao and the other disciples explore on their own. However, the problem is, once the elders make their move, this matter will inevitably shock the world, and there will no longer be any possibility of keeping it a secret. When the time comes, once the Xingjing sect is alarmed, I believe the other two sects don't want to see Xingjing sect being the only one. Therefore, the development of the matter is more likely to be the second plan. Feng Yin paused, swept his eyes around, and then said with a sinking voice, fully trust our successor disciples and let them act alone. We, the old guys, will never participate. At the same time, we will also not allow any other old guys from the other sects to intervene. As long as our three sects insist that this is the cultivation of the younger generation disciples, even Xingjing sect would not be able to intervene. In this way, no matter how much the harvest is, it will be divided equally among the three sections. I believe Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect would also be inclined to this plan. Huayun was somewhat worried. Wouldn't it be too risky if it's just the few of them? After all, this is the sword catacomb from 10,000 years ago, and it has also experienced the age of chaos. Even if the intention of the predecessors is to select the successor, they won't kill them. However, in case there's a change in the array inside, their cultivation base is, after all, too low. Feng Yin said, therefore we can also have the third plan. We can pretend that this thing never happened. Huayun was suddenly at a loss for words. Among the present elders, only Huayun hasn't really experienced the tragedy of 100 years ago. Therefore she was also the soft-hearted one. No matter what the other elders thought, they never thought of giving up this opportunity. Even if behind this opportunity was a huge crisis. If it was other disciples, then it would be fine. However, since they were the successor disciples, carrying the legacy and future of the Lingjian school, and even shouldering the mission of being the mainstay of the great era, they were doomed to not grow up in the gentle breeze and drizzle. The ancient sword catacomb was indeed full of crises, but compared to the growth process of the heavenly sword hall elders, what were these tribulations? Not to mention that the sword catacomb was full of opportunities. Not to mention, the Lingjian school had Wang Lu, this big killer weapon. Chapter 229. In fact, in addition to Huayun's doubts, when the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall learned that the ancient sword tomb was the inheritance of a true immortal, they basically established the general direction. As the sect leader, Feng Yin had the power to make a decision. It was just that, usually he almost never used it. He always discussed with his junior brothers and sisters before making a decision. However, when Feng Yin already had his own idea, the other elders rarely expressed their objection. It was not that they were afraid of authority. The deep affection between the 10 elders of Heavenly Sword Hall was far beyond the imagination of ordinary cultivators. Power and interest were meaningless to them. The other elders supported Feng Yin because, as the great elder and the sect leader, he had the vision and wisdom to protect the sect for more than 100 years. After a moment of silence, the reward giver elder, whose status was second only to the sect leader, saw that there was no problem, so he further set the tone. Then let's go with the second plan. Let Yao and the others take this opportunity to exercise, and also see what level the elite disciples of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect are. I heard that the lead disciple of 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai, has successfully comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength has surpassed Lu Li Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect is similar to him. They are all formidable opponents that the next generation disciples can't underestimate. Zhou Ming also sighed with emotion. I originally thought that little Lu Li, who accompanied Wang Lu to experience the immortal fate in Cloud Region, would be ahead of her peers in cultivation base. Unexpectedly, she just barely caught up with the progress of others. This generation is really amazing. Lu Xian said, luck is not something that can be envied, and Lingjian School's advantage can only be reflected after reaching the Taoist master stage. In short, this time the three sects will jointly explore the ancient sword tomb, presumably they will go all out. There will be cooperation and competition between them. Compared to Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect, although Yao Er and Wang Lu each have their own strengths, they are after all weak. At the current stage of immortal cultivation, we can only send out 3 successor disciples and a few other people. However, Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect should have no problem forming a team of 10 people. Therefore, in these few days, us old guys shouldn't be idle. Whatever means and treasures we have, we should use them. No matter which peak they are from, they are all successor disciples of Spirit Sword sect, so there's nothing to hide. Wang Wu strongly supported this. Well said. Strong support. Recently, Wang Lu has been cultivating the great art of shapeless metal dissipation. He needs 100,000 spirit stones every day to make any progress. I sincerely ask for your support. The sect leader said softly, such an evil cultivation method, just tell him not to cultivate it. Hey, aren't you going to give your full support? Yeah. Feng Yin coldly said, therefore we are also considering whether we should change him to a more reliable master. In any case, his non-phase method has already reached a certain level, so he can continue to practice without you. F***ck, you guys can't abandon me like this. After eliminating the interference of the fifth elder, the rest of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall decided on the scope of their contributions. Some contributed their unique magical treasures, some contributed their elixirs, and some were willing to pass on their skills to their disciples so that their cultivation could temporarily increase. In the end, even Wang Wu solemnly declared that she would teach Wang Lu a new set of cultivation techniques. Although it was a benefit for their own disciple, the rest of the elders had no objection. In fact, the biggest task given to Wang Wu by the Lingjian school was to train Wang Lu well. At the end of the discussion, Lu Xian said, the preliminary preparation work has been set. The next step is to draw up a preliminary plan of action. Although the specific details have to wait until we communicate with Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect, we still need to have a basic idea. I mean, we should let Wang Lu lead the team. Although in terms of strength, Yao Er is obviously above him, and little Lu Li can also make great progress after a short period of training, but in the process of exploring the sword tomb, Wang Lu's strategic ability is undoubtedly the most important. Fang He questioned, that's true. After the experiential learning in the Grand Cloud Mountain, I also recognize his talent as a team leader. But now, only little Lu Li is convinced by him. He and Yao Er haven't established enough trust. Several elders turned to look at Zhu Shiyao. The woman looked indifferent, still sitting at the wooden table in the bamboo room. Her slender hand stroked the sword and her eyes were like stars. The elders felt a bit of a headache. Zhu Shiyao's temperament was too cold and even too arrogant. In addition to the way of the sword, she didn't care about anything else. If one wanted to get her approval, they had to prove their strength and talent. And in the entire Spirit Sword Mountain, only the sect leader Feng Yin could use his peerless sword to suppress her. If it were other people, such as Lu Xian and Fang He, although they were also the most authoritative elders, and their cultivation base was far above the current Zhu Shiyao, it was impossible for them to casually instruct Zhu Shiyao to do the work that she hated. As for Wang Lu, previously, when Zhu Shiyao returned to the mountain and used her extreme divergent sword language to frighten the disciples of Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Lu also found it difficult to resist and had to take half a step back, which made it impossible for Zhu Shiyao to be convinced. After a moment of silence, Wang Wu sneered, "You bunch of idiots, your brains are really rigid and rotten. Isn't it easy to be disobedient? No matter how indifferent Zhu Shiyao is, she's still a woman. If a woman is disobedient, then **ck her until she is obedient. No matter how tough a woman is, the man who enters her body will be particularly weak." Inside the bamboo room there was a deathly silence. The temperature even plummeted and a thin layer of frost and cold mist rose. Wang Wu, however, seemed to be unaware of it as she continued, "In the next few days, I will design a set of non-phase diamond pestle for Wang Lu. I guarantee that after he practices it, he will become twice as powerful and unyielding, bringing the hard characteristic of the non-phase method to the extreme, making Zhu Shiryao obedient. The sect leader softly opened his mouth. His voice trembled, no, his whole body was gently trembling. Wang Wu said with a smile, "Rest assured, senior brother, when the method is perfected, I will also teach you to practice it. I guarantee that you will be like an old tree blooming, like the setting sun falling red." You shut your mouth. These filthy words are simply unimaginable. From today on, for the next 3 years, you will no longer have any offerings. Wang Wu, as if struck by a bolt from the blue, was flabbergasted. What? Then she quickly turned around to ask for help. Brothers, help me. Even Hua Yun, who had a good relationship with her, couldn't stand it anymore. Senior sister, you are short of money recently. Every time you are short of money you lose your moral integrity. Luli also sighed. Senior sister, I still have some spirit stones, I'll give them to you. You better be a little more reserved. Amidst the quarrel, Zhu Shiryao suddenly stood up. As soon as the woman stood up, the rest of the elders shut their mouths and turned their attention to her. After Zhu Shiryao got up, her willowy eyebrows slightly wrinkled and her cherry lips opened and closed, as if there was something stuck in her throat. She was not good with words. Although she had an idea in her heart, it was difficult for her to say it out loud. Therefore she resorted to the sword. She casually waved the top-grade spiritual treasure ancient sword from the ancient sword tomb, which turned into a mass of starry sword chi that diffused in all directions. Everyone present could feel Zhu Shiryao's firm will from this bitingly cold sword intent, and for a while they were silent. Zhu Shiryao had made up her mind. As soon as she waved her sword, she floated away, leaving the bamboo room cold and lonely. What did Yao say just now? Wang Wu was puzzled and had to ask for help from others. Several elders looked embarrassed. In the end, Fang He coldly snorted. She said that she will never team up with Wang Lu, let alone listen to his instructions. In the ancient sword tomb she wants to go alone. Wang Wu was dumbfounded. This, at such a young age, she is determined to be a leftover woman, why bother? You have the *king face to ask? After a long silence, the sect leader finally spoke. Actually, this is also good. Yao is proud and arrogant, so she wants to knead her into Wang Lu's team. Not only will it be difficult for the two of them to cooperate tacitly, but it will also cause internal friction for no reason. Moreover, strictly speaking, Yao has been under my tutelage for nearly 20 years, and Wang Lu has also been on the mountain for more than 10 years. I think we might as well take a look at the so-called chosen one in the stellar diffraction technique or the reincarnated sword god that I personally selected. Which side is stronger? It's good for the disciples of the Lingjian school to get along with each other, but we also need to strengthen the internal competition, especially for Wang Lu. He has talent, and his cultivation progress is also quite good. However, compared to Yao, his motivation to cultivate is still lacking, so we might as well give him more pressure. As for Yao, she has the ancient sword to protect her, so she can protect herself by herself. With that, the sect leader seemingly unintentionally glanced at his junior sister. Sure enough, he saw that she looked relaxed, with a heartless and joyous look. You this guy, are you addicted to playing the bad guy? The documents from 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect were sent to Spirit Sword Mountain a day later. As expected by Feng Yin, the two sects put forward a strict confidentiality proposal to let their disciples act alone. Obviously, they didn't want this matter to be made public, lest a long night brings many dreams. The southern heaven region was too remote for the three sects, beyond their reach. Of course, with the strength of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, if they had to fight across the region, the local sects such as Beastmaster School and the others in the southern heaven region would still not be able to resist. The problem was, with the continent-wide strategy of Xingjing sect, the situation had become delicate. As the head of the 5 uniques, Xingjing sect's comprehensive strength could almost be seen as the sum of the other 3 sections. Although this behemoth was bloated, if it really wanted to oppress others, only the dead barbarians of the Royal Soldier sect could go head-on against it. Therefore, the best way was to bypass Xingjing sect, which required a high degree of secrecy. The news about the Lingjian school was limited to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, Zhu Shiryao and Wang Lu, the 2 successor disciples. Even Lu Li was temporarily concealed. Only the sect leader, several elders and several elite disciples of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect knew about it. Things might not necessarily be kept secret until the last moment, but a little bit more was a little bit more. As for the method of cooperation between the 3 sects, after 1 or 2 rounds of rapid and efficient negotiation, a tentative framework was set, the disciples of the three sects must take the big heart demon oath to bind each other not to harm each other. As for how to team up after entering the sword tomb, there was no clear requirement. After all, the situation in the deeper part of the sword tomb was still unknown, so it was meaningless to set too much detail. In order to show their sincerity, each of the three sects came up with a number of valuable spiritual objects, most of which were used to crack the mechanism in the sword tomb, or to save their lives. Among them, the 10,000 Arts sect contributed a very unique universal calculation formula, which could be used to quickly calculate the response method in the mechanism array. Kunlun sect contributed a set of ancient books, which recorded the various experiences of the predecessors in exploring the remains of true immortals, all of which were priceless. For this reason, the Lingjian school had quite a headache on how to come up with something of similar value. While the elders of the three sects were actively planning for the development of the sword tomb, Wang Lu was not idle. The biggest difficulty in this trip to the sword tomb was the heavy test left by the true immortals. And in the Spirit Sword Mountain, there was an expert who could crack no matter how complicated the mechanism was. "Lady Boss, I want to take out." Chapter 230. Wang Lu had always prided himself as a professional adventurer, and one of the main business of a professional adventurer was to solve all kinds of puzzles. The ancient sword tomb trial was naturally within the scope of his business. Just listening to Hai Xiaohai's experience in the sword tomb, Wang Lu felt that the two teams of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun Immortal sect were simply innumerable. Even if he was alone, he could do better than their team. But on the other hand, professional adventurers were not omnipotent. If he relied on himself, perhaps it would be difficult to continue until the third level, and he still needed help to continue. Compared to Zhu Shiyao, who easily walked into the treasure room alone, Wang Lu also admitted that at least in terms of the first 3 levels, he was not the best. Moreover, apart from Zhu Shiyao, he dared not say that he was the number 1 in the Spirit Sword Mountain sect in terms of strategy. The lady boss of the Ru family inn in Spirit Creek Town was the real expert. No matter how big the mechanism array was, under the touch of her slender jade-like hands, it would disintegrate into nothingness. Plus, although she looked petite and exquisite, in fact, her iron fist was like a hammer, and her strength was as great as an ox. As long as she pushed all the way, there was no obstacle that she could not pass. Therefore, when it came to the in-depth development of the ancient sword tomb, the first person that came to Wang Lu's mind was the lady boss. "Lady boss, I want to take out." Pushing open the door of the inn, he saw the lady boss behind the counter was somewhat restlessly tapping her abacus in front of a blank account book. The calculation process was probably 0 + 0 = 0. Seeing Wang Lu came in, the lady boss put down her abacus, raised her eyelids and said, "Why don't you hurry to prepare for the experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region? Why are you wasting your time here? Why do you want takeout?" Wang Lu said with a sinking voice, "I want a pair of white-cut pig's trotters that can break all kinds of methods." The lady boss picked up the wine jar and smashed it. "Don't be so grumpy, I'm very sincere in asking for help." The lady boss glanced at him. "I told you, my ability is only the most effective in the Spirit Sword Mountain, and the furthest I can go is the Blue River region. I can't do anything in the Southern Heaven region." Wang Lu explained, "The main body of the sword tomb is not in the Southern Heaven region. The Southern Heaven region is just an entrance that was accidentally discovered. It exists in an unknown space where the sword tomb and 9 regions meet." The lady boss said, "My main body isn't in the Tianan, but it's not in the Blue River region either. Once I cross the boundary, I won't be able to display my abilities, but if that thing escapes, can you bear the responsibility?" Wang Lu said, "That's why I don't dare to hope that you'll personally accompany me, Sister Ling. However, do you have any way to make your ability portable? For example, is it possible for your undergarments to inherit the effects of your ability? Pervert, die." Wait, Sister Ling, this is based on academic research." Jokes aside, when Wang Lu saw Feng Ling's attitude, he knew that his dreams had been shattered. There were no shortcuts to the development of Tianan Sword Tomb. Of course, he should have thought that if Feng Ling was so useful, even if the sect leader had to kneel and lick her boots, he would still use her power. He just considered that their relationship was bad, and perhaps Feng Ling was deliberately standing by, but now it seemed that this was not the case. However, he was just trying his luck. Sister Ling's undergarments. No, he couldn't get a portable item to break through the barrier, so it would be good to have a portion of sliced pig's trotters as a sumptuous meal. However, just when Wang Lu gave up, the lady boss slightly hesitated and said, "This time the exploration of the ancient sword tomb is very risky. I see that there are quite a lot of disputes among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, so don't be too careless. I have a treasure here which was given to me by old man Feng. It can save my life at a critical moment. I think you might be able to use it. With that, the lady boss took out an orange jade tablet from her bosom and directly stuffed it into Wang Lu's hand. When you need it, just crush it. Unless it's a life and death situation, don't use it carelessly. If you don't have any use for it, that's for the best. Remember to return it to me when you come back. Wang Lu only felt a warmth in his hand, and the jade tablet that had the warmth of a young girl fell into his hand without any hesitation. Without waiting for him to speak, the lady boss turned around and went to the kitchen. Since her signal to send him off was so obvious, even though Wang Lu was a little puzzled, he still left the Ru family in. However, as he held the jade tablet given by the lady boss, a question involuntarily appeared in his mind. Because of Feng Ling's constitution, she rarely touched any spiritual objects, because it was very likely that she would destroy the treasure with just a light touch. During the immortal gathering, when she gave him the fresh-keeping food container, she had placed a handkerchief on it. But now she directly took off the jade tablet. Was she not afraid of damaging the spiritual object? Wang Lu observed it curiously. The spiritual energy in the jade tablet was restrained, and it was sealed with a unique method. Unless he really crushed it, he would not be able to determine its specific effects. After saying goodbye to the Ru family inn, his second stop was Misty Peak's cafeteria. Oh, Wang Lu, it's you. I heard that you're going to a very dangerous place to train? That's right. A qualified swordsman should continuously challenge themselves in dangerous situations and sharpen their swords. Wait a moment, I have something for you. While speaking, Aya did not allow him to say anything else. She quickly took out a large package. This is the military rations I specially prepared for you. It's a special product of Blue Sky Peak, so it's very nutritious. Wang Lu was silent for a while, but he accepted it for the time being. He thought that when he needed to use poison, he would at least have the raw materials. After giving away her sincerity, Aya felt carefree. Then, is there anything else? Wang Lu said, I want to spar with you with the sword again. It has indeed been a long time since we've sparred with the sword. You've grown a lot during this period of time, so let me see your new skills. As he spoke, his dark green eyes shone with an aggressive light. In the last sparring session with Aya, as expected, he was once again defeated. Similarly, as expected, he had a new understanding. This chef of the Misty Peak could be said to be one of the most mysterious people in Spirit Sword Mountain. Seemingly without the least bit of immortal method, she was just a mortal with good swordsmanship. However, with his current Shudan stage strength, Wang Lu still could not win against her. Aya's swordsmanship was like a never-ending towering peak. The stronger she was, the stronger she became, making it impossible for people to guess where her limit was. However, the reason why Wang Lu sparred with her was not to win, but to sharpen his sword edge. Sparring with Aya before the expedition was like using a good whetstone to sharpen himself, sharpening all the immature details of his swordsmanship, making his non-phase sword more rounded. Sharpening his sword at any time, after all, would have some effect. A day later, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall began to summon the successor disciples to the Stellar Peak. Wang Lu bid farewell to Aya and, with the latter's blessing, stepped on the transmission array and arrived at the Stellar Peak. In front of the sect leader's bamboo room on the Stellar Peak, Luli had already arrived ahead of time. She was leaning against a few bamboos, holding a bag of nuts and tasting them. However, when she saw Wang Lu, she threw away the nuts, cheerfully jumped over, hugged Wang Lu, and said with a silly smile, Master told me to listen to you. Then let's shake hands. Oh, sit down. Oh, stand up. Oh. Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head and was about to praise her when he suddenly found out that not far away, several pairs of sharp sword-like eyes were firmly locked on him. Second Elder Lu Xian, Third Elder Fang He, Fourth Elder Zhou Ming. Almost all the Heavenly Sword Hall elders were gathered here, coldly watching his pet teasing behavior. Wang Lu coughed and tried to explain, just now we prepared to perform a skit for everyone at the annual meeting. It's called Shimin Qing skillfully plays Snoopy, please correct me. Humph. Zhou Ming coldly humphed and turned his head away. Most of the other elders were also indifferent. Only his master fiercely gave him a thumbs up and secretly said through primordial spirit, Brat, good job, Brilliant Peak is very rich. You have to stabilize this money tree for me. Stabilize your grandpa, Wang Lu. While he was feeling awkward, the sect leader faintly opened his mouth. Yes. This time you will lead the team to the ancient sword tomb. You are born smart and you have experienced a lot of things in the past 10 years. I don't need to say anything unnecessary, but I still want to emphasize that you are the lead disciple of the sect. This is not only a right but also an obligation. Wang Lu sternly said, I understand. I will certainly take good care of junior sister Lu Li and senior sister Shi Yao. I will not disappoint other people's trust in me. Feng Yin shook his head. It's good to have such determination, but there's still one thing wrong. Yao Er will not be in the same team as you. She will be alone. Wang Lu was taken aback. His eyes turned to the bamboo room. A tall woman quietly stood in the shadow of the bamboo room's corner. She was aloof from the world, but her arrogant posture was also undeniable. Interesting, does she look down on us, a group of burdens? Wang Lu smiled. Then let's wait and see. Let's see who is better, this god of hoodlums or me, this professional adventurer. Feng Yin also said, but in addition to Lu Li, you still have other team members to take care of. Shirshan, come. Yes. Along with the soft voice of a woman, the air on the stellar peak suddenly became a bit more refreshing. A white figure slowly walked out from the bamboo forest. With a faint smile, Bai Shirshan walked to the front of the bamboo room, nodded to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders one by one, and then smiled at Wang Lu. Senior brother. Wang Lu, long time no see. Wang Lu suddenly understood. Indeed, long time no see. In a blink of an eye you seem to have grown up. More than a month ago, Bai Shirshan was brought back to the clear sky peak by the seventh elder for closed-door training. Now that they met again, Bai Shirshan still maintained her slightly immature and childish appearance, but her expression was calm and composed. She was no longer the simple immortal beast that could be deceived by a bone. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Bai Shirshan and Lu Li were, after all, different. In this more than a month at the clear sky peak, Bai Shirshan's harvest was obviously not only the healing of her internal injuries, but she also learned a lot of common sense from Uncle Guanhai. Now Bai Shirshan was still pure and natural, but she appeared to be a lot more mature. Only, deep in her eyes, there was still a trace of affection that could only be opened to him. Shirshan is an immortal beast with innate magical ability. With her help, I believe we can be like a tiger that has grown wings. With that, the sect leader flipped his palm, and the stellar peak suddenly glowed with starlight. Since everyone is here, no need to waste time. You guys go ahead. According to the agreement between Lingjian School, Kunlun Sect, and 10,000 Arts Sect, in order to keep it a secret, when the time came, the three sects would each open the transmission portal to the treasure room of the Sword Tomb and then converge inside the Sword Tomb. Among them, at the end of the experiential learning, the disciples of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect had left a transmission mark in the treasure room. Although Zhu Shiyao didn't remember to leave the mark, the mysterious underworld ancient sword in her hand could directly resonate with the Sword Tomb. In this way they could avoid the eyes and ears of other sections. Under the instruction of the sect leader, Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu, Lu Li, Bai Shirshan, the four people representing Lingjian School stepped into the sea of starlight, feeling the turbulence of space, ready to meet the new test. Feng Yin controlled the array, tearing the space with his deity stage cultivation base, and his magical power pierced through the void, going straight to the unnamed space where the Sword Tomb was located. On the stellar peak, the reward-giver elder couldn't help but give his last exhortation. In this trip, our Lingjian School has the least number of people, but you must show the style of Lingjian School, neither servile nor overbearing. Of course, the three sects still focus on cooperation. Don't be too confrontational so as to spoil the important matter. In short, the nagging voice hasn't stopped yet. Along with Feng Yin Taoist Master's command, the scenery in front of Wang Lu and the others suddenly distorted, and in the blink of an eye, everything turned gray. According to the plan, after the transmission was launched, they would stop at the treasure room of the ancient Sword Tomb. There, Wang Lu and the others would meet up with the people of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect to dig deeper secrets of the Sword Tomb. It was just that. Wang Lu frowned, inwardly puzzled. Previously, no one said that there were so many people from Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, right? Looking at the huge team of more than 30 people, as well as the fluctuation of magical power that was very different from that of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, Wang Lu's heart slightly sank. The trip to the Sword Tomb had just begun, but the situation seemed to have developed in an uncontrollable direction. Chapter 231. The treasure room of the Sword Tomb was relatively spacious, but at this time with more than 30 to 40 people squeezed in, it seemed a bit cramped and the atmosphere was quite subtle. When Wang Lu and the others appeared from the transmission array, they immediately attracted everyone's attention, just like pouring cold water into a hot pan. Who are they? Again. Hurry up and tell them to get out of here, this group of trash. The noise of life made Wang Lu frown. This kind of chaos was not in line with any plan. However, there was a way to deal with the unplanned situation. As long as he didn't change, there was nothing to be afraid of. Calming himself down, Wang Lu swept his eyes around. Among the large group of unfamiliar faces, he also found a few familiar faces. The other side of course also discovered Wang Lu. After a moment of hesitation they came over. Brother Wang. A slight smile hung on Wang Lu's face. Little hi, there's also Brother Zai over there, long time no see. These people were the disciples of the 10,000 Arts sect, led by their eldest brother Zhan Zai. In the past, when the two sects met, Yi Feifei Zhao Jiangyuan, and the others were also present. Behind them were two people with similar age and cultivation base. Obviously, they were also the elite disciples of the 10,000 Arts sect. What's going on here? Hai Yunfan wryly smiled. Man proposes but God disposes. For a disciple of the 10,000 Arts sect to say this, it seemed like a great change had happened. Moreover, it was a change that was difficult to deal with. Combined with the situation at the scene, Wang Lu thought for a moment and then said, Shengjing sect? Although he didn't understand why the strictly confidential operation would be interrupted by the Shengjing sect, but to be able to make the calculation of the three sects fail, to make the Fengyin Taoist master unable to deduce it, and to make the disciples of the 10,000 Arts sect, one of the five uniques, feel deeply helpless. No matter how he thought about it, only the Shengjing sect could meet this condition. Yes, it's the Shengjing sect. A vigorous and powerful voice suddenly came in, and then a tall male cultivator separated from the crowd and walked to the front of Wang Lu, covering him in his shadow. Wang Lu's talent could be considered above average, but in front of this person he was like an underdeveloped child. If one were to look at him at eye level, they would only be able to see his chest. Then, without raising his head, Wang Lu stared at the other party's chest and said, Fellow Taoist from Shengjing? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, esteemed guest. Although the cultivators of Shengjing sect were tall, they were not reckless people. How could they not understand the implication of Wang Lu's words, which was that they were uninvited guests? However, he didn't care about the implied words and snorted coldly, You're from Lingjin school? I have nothing to say to you. Go back to where you came from and stop being a hindrance here. Wang Lu lightly said, Turtle dove occupying magpie's nest, is this your Shengjing sect's way of doing things? A dove occupying a magpie's nest? Ridiculous, since when did ownerless things become your family's things? Hearing this remark, Wang Lu suddenly laughed and then looked up. Since you also admit that it's ownerless things, then at least it's not considered as Shengjing sects. Let's put aside our dispute and jointly develop it. As for exploring the depths of the sword tomb, it's up to our own chance. That's not bad. What a glib tongue. The tall cultivator sneered a few times but didn't speak again. His condescending eyes revealed a trace of appreciation. Different from Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect and Zhan Zai of 10,000 Arts sect, the young cultivator from Blue River region, his words were more shrewd and more pragmatic. When they first met the people from Kunlun sect, the two sects almost fought. Zhou Mumu, the leader of Kunlun sect, didn't expect to meet Shengjing sect cultivators here. Surprised, she didn't hesitate to spew venomous slander, slandering Shengjing sect for using a despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sections. Later, when the people from 10,000 Arts sect arrived, they were also surprised. However, Zhan Zai was a bit calmer than Zhou Mumu. He guessed the inside story and didn't directly accuse Shengjing sect people of using despicable tricks. Instead, he emphasized that the sword tomb belonged to the three sects, Kunlun sect, 10,000 Arts sect and Spirit Sword sect, and Shengjing sect had no right to interfere. That's all fart. Despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sects? If Shengjing sect wanted to know, why would they need to steal your information? They were really short-sighted, looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Shengjing sect spread their influence all over the 9 regions, not just for the immediate benefit. The 9-region strategy has been implemented for more than 1,000 years, but Shengjing sect actually didn't really do much plundering. They just deeply engraved the mark of Shengjing sect in every part of the 9 regions. Later, the sect leader Hichu Daoren spent 100 years to build the Immortal Treasure 9 Regions map in Shengjing Immortal City, which connected the geography of the 9 regions. From then on, all the major events in the world were under his control. Therefore, how could Shengjing sect not know about the appearance of the ancient sword tomb in the Southern Heaven region? Of course, even if it was the Immortal Treasure 9 Regions map, it was impossible to calculate all the changes in the world. It could only perceive the major events, but the details were vague. And in the area where Shengjing sect's power was slightly inferior, the 9 regions map's response was relatively insensitive. Plus, the 9 regions was so big that changes were happening all the time. No matter how powerful Xinjing sect was, it was difficult for them to take all of them into account. For example, the news about the birth of the immortal beast on the Grand Cloud Mountain in the Grand Cloud Mountain was vague on the 9 regions map, so it didn't attract enough attention. Later, when the immortal treasure map issued a warning, Bai Shixian had already completed her transformation, and the 5th elder of Spirit Sword Mountain personally went to the Grand Cloud Mountain. Thus Xinjing sect had to give up. As for the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region, Xinjing sect also misjudged it. They mistakenly thought that there were, at most, 1 or 2 high-rank spiritual treasures in the sword tomb, which was not worth spending too much manpower and material resources. At that time, there were already 3 sects from the 5 uniques competing for it, so there was no need for Xinjing sect to forcefully intervene. However, when the Lingjian school disciples took away the treasure, Xinjing sect discovered the abnormality. In the 9 regions map, the symbol of the birth of the rare treasure in the southern heaven region not only didn't disperse, but instead, it vaguely showed a stronger tendency. It was just that, indistinct and intermittent. The sect leader calculated with his supreme divination technique and determined that there might be a secret in the depths of the sword tomb. It was just that, as an inheritance tomb, it was not suitable to break it with brute force. Thus, he immediately ordered the elite disciples of the immortal sect to form a team to explore it. The reaction of Xinjing sect was actually a bit slower than that of the other 3 sections. However, the extraordinariness of this leader of the immortal sect was without a doubt. Although it started late, its unique internal management model allowed it to complete the organization mobilization in the first instance. From the central region Immortal City as well as its various branches, it gathered a 25-people team and directly rushed to the entrance of the Sword Tomb. They didn't have the transmission mark left by Kunlun Immortal Sect's 10,000 Arts Sect and the others, so they started from the beginning. The first 3 passes only took them half a day to completely break through, which was an exceptionally amazing efficiency. Of course, this was normal for the people of Xinjing sect. Although these 25 people were hastily assembled, they were the elites of the Immortal Sect, absolutely not mediocre. The leader was the 7th of the 19 successor disciples of the Immortal Sect, Power King Jianglu, who was at the peak of Shudan stage. His mysterious gold unbreakable body had reached the 16th layer, and his comprehensive strength was not inferior to the other lead disciples of the 5 uniques. His deputies were the twins Wangyuel Wanyu and Wangyuel Wanyun, who were ranked 70 and 18th among the 19 successor disciples. The 2 of them held the Yin and Yang treasure chest, and when they joined forces, their strength was even a notch higher than Jianglu's. The remaining 20 or so cultivators were also the absolute elites of the Immortal Sect, with the lowest cultivation base being middle-level Shudan. Coupled with their superior cultivation method and magical treasures, their comprehensive strength was not much inferior to that of Taoist Master King Pil of a common high-rank sect. With such a powerful team, why would they need to steal the news of Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect? Relying on their own ability alone was enough to be successful in every endeavor in the Sword Tomb. Uninvited guests, turtledove occupying the magpie's nest? How ridiculous. When their team entered the treasure room and was about to open the entrance of the 4th pass, Kunlun Sect's Zhou Mumu had just arrived. 10,000 Arts Sect's Zhan Zai and the others were nowhere to be seen. The uninvited guests should be the disciples of Kunlun Immortal Sect and the other 2 sects. After realizing this problem, Wang Lu simply didn't entangle himself with the ownership and development of the Sword Tomb. Instead, he directly put forward the argument that they should put aside the dispute, avoiding the disadvantage. From a reasonable point of view, this argument was the most difficult to refute. Because although Xinjing sect was the first to arrive, compared to the other 3 sects, they had, after all, lost the initiative. Thus, it was completely unclear who the right to develop the Sword Tomb belonged to. And how to deal with this unclear issue? It was very simple. One was Wang Lu's proposal to put aside the dispute and focus on developing the treasure of the Sword Tomb first. The other was, "What a joke, who wants to put aside the dispute with you?" From the Xinjing sect team, a tall and thin cultivator sneered. "Do you think you can compete with Xinjing sect for the treasure of the Sword Tomb?" However, before Wang Lu could speak, a heroic young girl from the Kunlun Immortal Sect team furrowed her willowy eyebrows and angrily rebuked, "Wishful thinking? Didn't your sect master teach you first come, first served?" "First come, first served? When I came here you Zhou Mumu were still on the road, yet you have the nerve to talk about first come, first served. Your Kunlun immortal sect has always boasted itself as the ancestor of the immortal path. How could you not distinguish right from wrong? The last time we came here, your Xingjing sect didn't even know this place. Seeing that the two sides were going to talk about the same old thing again, the Xingjing sect's cultivators didn't say much. More than 20 people simultaneously took a step forward. Under the pressure of their astonishing imposing manner, the 6 people from Kunlun immortal sect suddenly looked a bit ugly. No matter how strong their mouth was, they couldn't deny the fact that Xingjing sect was the strongest among them. Among the 25 people, any one of them was not weak. The imposing manner of the Kunlun immortal sect's cultivators was a notch lower. Zhou Mumu hastily turned to look at the 10,000 arts sect. Although the two sects weren't that close, they after all joined hands last time. Zhan Zai's 10,000 methods comprehension skill had an astonishing strength, so he could be a very powerful support. However, when her eyes turned, Zhou Mumu couldn't help but be stunned. The last time they met, Zhan Zai, who was quite heroic and somewhat bookish, was now like a young man who had his first awakening of love. His face was full of shyness, and from time to time, he would secretly glance at a naked girl from the Lingjian school. Your mother. What the hell are you doing here? Zhan Zai was unreliable, so Zhou Mumu had to pin her hope on the Lingjian school. Previously, she didn't have much contact with the cultivators of the Lingjian school, but she had long heard of the name of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, Wang Lu. Moreover, in the last trip to the Sword Tomb, she received a sword strike from Zhu Shiyao, which nearly shattered her immortal Tai exquisite body. If the Lingjian school was willing to take the lead, the 3 sects might be able to fight against Xingjing sect. Allow me to say a few words. While the situation was tense, Wang Lu said, this ancient sword tomb was left behind by a true immortal from the ancient times, and its level is far beyond the present age. Moreover, after experiencing the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos, it's likely that there are quite a number of mechanisms malfunctioning or mutation, making it even more dangerous. Although your sect's team is powerful, I'm afraid it's unrealistic to say that it's like walking on flat ground. Similarly, it's the same for our Spirit Sword sect, Kunlun Immortal sect, and 10,000 Arts sect. So, instead of having internal friction, it's better for us to join hands and explore it. The scale of this sword tomb is unprecedented, and there are countless treasures, so why do we have to eat it alone? Jianglu nodded and said, Xingjing sect doesn't necessarily want to eat it alone. If we can get strong support in the process of exploring the sword tomb, that would naturally be a good thing. However, we're worried that when the time comes, we won't get a helping hand but a dagger from the back. This Power King Jianglu was tall and strong, and his method was firm and fierce, but his mind was calm and meticulous, which was quite inconsistent with his appearance. Wang Lu said with a smile, then let's make the big heart demon oath. However, this time it was the Kunlun sect people who came to undermine them. Seeing that Wang Lu wanted to join hands with Xingjing sect, Zhou Mumu was quite annoyed. Is your Lingjian school so spineless? Seeing Xingjing sect, you can't even stand firm and shamelessly flatter them? Jianglu laughed. See that? Even your 3 sects are scheming against each other. How can I feel at ease to accept you as my teammates? Moreover, what Brother Wang just said is right, this ancient sword tomb is extremely dangerous, even our Xingjing sect has to be careful. As for your 3 sects, I won't say that you're just a motley crew, just save your energy and go home early. The 9 regions is vast and there are countless immortal opportunities. Our Xingjing sect doesn't want to eat all the benefits, so if we can't, you guys can freely play to your heart's content. Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. Isn't it clear that you're only giving the leftovers to others? If you guys really have the ability, Xingjing sect welcomes you to compete. Unfortunately, even if your 3 sects join forces, it's still not enough. Wang Lu said that he was waiting for this sentence. However, before he could open his mouth, he heard a stuttering but ice-cold voice behind him. So noisy, so noisy. The next moment, the dazzling starlight sprinkled in every corner of the treasure room. Tens of thousands of cold stars made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. However, once they reached out and touched the starlight, they could feel the astonishing heat bursting out from it. Ice and fire intertwined. Under the illumination of the starlight, this ancient sword tomb vaguely shook. A moment later, a burst of collapsing sound came from a gray wall. The treasure room was actually broken. The passage to the 4th level of the sword tomb also leaked out from behind the wall. While everyone was incomparably shocked, Zhu Shiyao completely ignored the dispute between Xingjing sect and the other 3 sections. Her figure, like a breeze, floated toward the entrance to the 4th level. Wait a minute, The Xingjing sect cultivator who was closest to the wall reacted and reached out to stop her. However, when his 5 fingers opened and closed, the space collapsed and the 5 elements became chaotic, showing his terrifying power. Don't block the way. Bam. The crowd couldn't even see what happened, but the cultivator who reached out to stop her was hit back by an incomparably huge force and flew into the air like a straw. Power King Jianglu stared with eyes wide open, unable to believe what he saw. The person who was sent flying was one of the vice-captains of Xingjing sect, Wangyuel Wanyun. That seemingly ordinary person, but between his palms there was the yin and yang universe, the most unpredictable peak Shudan stage cultivator. After a moment of consternation, Jianglu chased after him in big strides and roared, "Want to run?" The other cultivators of Xingjing sect immediately followed. The 25 people, one after another, poured into the hole in the wall. As for the cultivators of the other 3 sections, Tisk, things are really hard to predict. Come on, what are you waiting for? Let's catch up. Following Wang Lu's call, the cultivators of the other 3 sects immediately followed in silence. Seeing that the previously difficult-to-solve deadlock was so violently broken, everyone's heart had different feelings. Among them Wang Lu felt it the most. Sure enough, 1,000 words are not as good as a straight stab. Chapter 232. What a frightening stellar sword. What a frightening spirit sword sect people. Running in the gray corridor behind the wall, Power King Jianglu's momentum was like a rainbow. His well-tempered mysterious golden battle body released an astonishing amount of energy, which was unstoppable. However, while running, Jianglu's heart couldn't help but surge with a burst of chill. Just now, when that earth-shaking stellar sword light shone, everything around him seemed to have stagnated, and the world fell into black and white. Only a tall and elegant figure bloomed with her own color, aloof from the world, aloof, disdainful of everything around her. That sword strike was aimed at the wall, and this ancient sword tomb that was built by a true immortal level method was actually broken under the might of that sword strike. Even the 25 people of Xingjing sect couldn't easily open the door to the 4th level, yet it was broken by her sword strike. What if that sword strike was aimed at him? Could the mysterious golden battle body withstand the stellar sword chi? Jianglu had no confidence. When Wangyuel Wanyun intercepted it with his yin and yang 5 elements divine claw, he was under the protection of the mountain array. It could be said that there were 24 people sharing the damage. Even a Yuanying stage cultivator would find it difficult to injure him. However, in front of that unpredictable stellar sword chi, he unexpectedly couldn't resist even the slightest bit. Jianglu clearly saw that what was broken was not the 25 people's joint defense, but the mountain array. Zhu Shiyao's marvelous swordsmanship broke the battle array and then defeated Wangyuel Wanyun, during which her figure didn't stop even for a moment. This kind of method was truly marvelous. Let alone her Shudan stage, even among the Taoist masters of King Pil, very few people could do this. Therefore, this was also the reason why Jianglu immediately led everyone to rush into the 4th level, regardless of the other 3 sections. Even if they could block the other 3 sects, so what? If they let Zhu Shiyao go in, who knew how far she could go? He heard that before she directly entered the treasure room on the 3rd level, which obviously meant that she had a great immortal affinity. It was very likely that she was recognized as the successor of the inheritance tomb. Therefore, no matter who went in, they couldn't let her go. As for the division of forces, it was even more foolish. Xingjing sect's team was indeed the strongest, but the other 3 sects were absolutely not weak. If they joined forces, their strength would actually be similar to the 25-people team of Xingjing sect. Once they divided their forces, the consequences would be difficult to predict. At this time, perhaps it was as the first seat of Lingjian school Wang Lu had said teaming up was the right choice. "Senior brother, what do we do now?" Behind her, Wangyuel Wanyun quickly caught up. He was injured by Zhu Shiyao's sword, and although he was treated by his fellow disciples, his complexion was still somewhat pale. Jianglu said, "Let's follow them first. As for those 3 sects cultivators, don't worry about them. Since we can't stop them at the checkpoint, there's no need to waste time on internal strife." "Yes, I understand." Wangyuel Wanyun nodded and asked again, "Senior brother, I can't sense her aura, are you still locking onto her?" Being asked about this matter, Jianglu was silent for a moment, and then said through primordial spirit, "Not at all. After stepping into the passage, I completely lost the clue. I suspect that the problem lies with the sword catacomb itself. This place looks like a straight path, but it's very likely that there are other mysteries. You must take care of your junior brothers and sisters, Don't let them get lost. Rest assured, Wanyu is presiding over the mountain chain array, so she won't easily get lost. Wanyun said and then frowned. But the strange thing is that Zhu Shiryao disappeared without a trace, as if she was sent to another place by the sword catacomb. However, the other people have been following behind us like maggots on a tarsal bone. This is also a good thing. It shows that they have no way to keep up with Zhu Shiryao. Those people from Lingjian school are very interesting, they don't seem to be that united. Halfway through his words, Jianglu shook his head and no longer thought about it. Forget it, now is not the time to think about this. I feel that the passage is about to end, let everyone get ready. At the same time, Wang Lu, who followed the Xingjing sect team into the 4th level, was also confused. Little Bai, can you still smell Big Sister's scent? No, she's no longer in this level. Bai Shixian, who was walking side by side with Wang Lu, wrinkled her nose and then gently shook her head. As an immortal beast, Bai Shixian naturally had a keen sense of smell that was superior to any human. Coupled with her pure Yin constitution, her perception even surpassed that of a Yuanying stage cultivator. If she said no, then she must be gone. Hee, 1,000 skills is really not as good as a plug-in. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Big Sister is indeed Big Sister. Senior brother, has Big Sister found the treasure? Lu Li curiously asked, then can we go back? There's a smell here that makes me very uncomfortable. The stale air from 10,000 years ago, of course it's uncomfortable. However, it's not to the extent of stopping. Big Sister has her immortal fate, but our immortal fate path has not been cut off. Otherwise, there's no need for the sword catacomb to design this endless passage and continue to maintain the trial level. This sword catacomb is the relic of a true immortal, so no one can monopolize it. She can take it and we can explore it. Lu Li was somewhat disappointed, but since Wang Lu said so, she had no objection. Senior brother, I smell a different smell, the passage should be coming to an end. A moment later, the Xingjing sect team in the front suddenly accelerated, apparently also aware of the change. After about a cup of tea time, the passage suddenly opened up, and in front of them was a bright sunshine. Walking out of the dark and narrow passageway, the first thing that came into view was a majestic mountain range. The exit of the passageway was set at the peak of a towering mountain. The top of the mountain was a flat open space. The area was abnormally vast, just like a plane. This magical ability of space transformation is really amazing, worthy to be an immortal technique. Looking at the vast and boundless space, the big brother of the 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai, sincerely sighed with emotion. As an academic cultivator, he was very clear about the astonishing amount of magical power needed to open up such a place in the sword catacomb. Although it was normal for a decent sect to open up an immortal cave in their sect, the space was rarely this vast. And this was just one of the trials designed by the sword catacomb to select its successor. However, for the other people, the issue that was worth paying attention to was obviously not the immortal technique of the immortal from ancient times. How could they continue the 4th trial? What kind of clues were hidden in this mountain range? How should they deal with the relationship with the other sects in the process of conquering this place? Because of Zhu Shiryao's soul-stirring sword strike, the original stalemate situation was broken. The people of the 4 sects simultaneously entered the 4th trial of the ancient sword catacomb, vaguely forming an alliance. However, everyone knew that sincere cooperation was absolutely a fantasy. Just as everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, a strange voice suddenly rang out in everyone's mind. #yen% at #yen. What? Most of the cultivators of the 4 sects looked at each other in blank dismay, but there were also a few people who seemed to be thinking about something. This is an ancient language that was once popular in the Age of Chaos before the Age of Chaos. The one who first revealed the riddle was Hai Yunfan of the 10,000 Arts sect. The cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect were good at academics, and the elites of the sects who came to the sword catacomb also had their own strong points. Among them, Hai Yunfan was quite knowledgeable in the ancient language. What I heard was, defeat the guardian and enter the next trial. A moment later, Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect nodded and said, what I heard is the same. As the most ancient sect in the Wanxian League, Kunlun sect also had a deep understanding of ancient things. Most of their disciples were experts in ancient knowledge. Yes, the content is indeed like that, probably not wrong. This time, Xingjing sect sent their elite team, among which there were also talents who understood the ancient language. While the other 3 sects were exchanging their experience, Wang Lu also tried his best to recall what he had learned. According to the relevant records in the 10,000 Strange Tales of the 9 Regions, This is the common language that spread in most of the southern parts of the 9 regions before the Age of Chaos. However, judging from the pronunciation, it should have spread 11,000 years ago in the Jianma mountain area of the Baili region, which is today's local dialect variant of the southern region. In the book Baili's Ascension to Heaven, it recorded the true immortals who came from the Baili region. Before the Age of Chaos, it was rumored that there were 3 true immortals: 100 Eyes Supreme, Flame River Supreme, and Purple Yuan Supreme. Among them, 100 Eyes Supreme was alone, so it doesn't seem like he would leave behind a legacy for future generations. As for whether it's the other 2 true immortals, further research is needed. However, it can provide people with materials for speculation. While thinking, he observed the indifferent exchange between the other 3 sections. However, Wang Lu actually found it funny. Although he was nicknamed the top student of Spirit Sword sect, he didn't dare to claim that he had top-notch knowledge. Especially now that the elites of the 5 uniques had gathered, no one dared to say that he could beat the others. The attainments of the disciples of the other 3 sects in the ancient language should not be below him, but now they pretended to understand and exchange with each other, which was really ridiculous. They were all old guns, so why would they pretend to be young? It was nothing more than feeling that the atmosphere here was strange. Plus, since the 4 sects had already coexisted, they had the intention to further cooperate. Using the academic exchange as a prelude, they began to have a dialogue between the teams. However, this was also good, at least it was better than fighting each other as soon as they arrived. The ancient sword tomb of the true immortal level, even a professional adventurer would find it difficult to solo, unless it was a lifetime cheat like Big Sister. Having several piles of cannon fodder around was absolutely useful. At this time, the people of the other 3 sects had just finished the foreplay and began to exchange the real valuable topic. They then heard Power King Jianglu ask, "So, who exactly is this voice?" Zhou Mumu said, "In the ancient era, most of the time, there will be a guardian similar to the spirit of the tool to guide the later generation to complete the inheritance. It's just that, perhaps because it's been too long, this guardian has lost its spirituality. Just now, I tried several methods to call it, but the response I got was the same sentence." Hai Yunfan said, "It's a non-intelligent character. But his hint is not wrong, we have to defeat the guardian to enter the next level." Jiang Lu agreed. Although this world is vast, it's completely lifeless and there's no clue to the next level. It's just that, who exactly is the guardian that it mentioned? Zhou Mumu also said awkwardly, "There's no clue at all. Moreover, it's strange that although this mountain is vast, there's not even the slightest breath of life. Even the vegetation is very sparse. As for the guardian, I can't see it at all." "How could you not see it?" Wang Lu's timely interjection successfully attracted everyone's attention. Jiang Lu earnestly asked, "Did you find it?" Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed forward. Among the rolling mountains, a towering mountain was particularly eye-catching. Looking from afar, the peak of the mountain went straight into the clouds, and the huge mountain shrouded the entire lake in its shadow. Even from a distance they could feel an astonishing sense of oppression. "Isn't that it?" Following the guidance of Wang Lu, Zhou Mumu and the others carefully observed the mountain. Although they couldn't find any spirituality, but it was true that the shape of the mountain was vaguely humanoid. Power King Jianglu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. "It can't be, right?" Wang Lu sneered. "What are you afraid of? It's just a mere 10,000 feet level trash." Chapter 233. Does this sword tomb have any sincerity at all? The lead disciple of Kunlun sect, Zhou Mumu, stared dumbfoundedly at the towering mountain in the distance. Inwardly she felt that it was absurd and unbelievable. Is this a guardian? This is AF** King Guardian? The condition for us to enter the next level is to defeat a 10,000 feet tall mountain? Are you kidding me? Although many people would describe the magical ability of cultivators with words like moving mountains and filling the sea, and in fact the great supreme level cultivators in the Wanxian League did have the ability to move mountains and fill the sea. However, among the cultivators present, there was not even a single Taoist master, so how could they move mountains? Not to mention the guardian was not a dead thing, it had a mountain-like body, so its magical ability was certainly higher than that of a mountain. According to legend, only the ancestors of the Desolation Age, which was even earlier than ancient times, had this kind of sky-covering body. And if any of these ancestors were to be brought to this world, perhaps they would have the power to sweep the 9 regions. Of course, if they were really the ancestors of the ancient era, they would not have fallen to be the watchdog of an ancient true immortal, not even the watchdog of the last level. However, the strength of this guardian was too beyond their expectation. At this time, even the most arrogant Xinjing sect people could not help but rejoice that they didn't adopt a high-pressure policy to try to monopolize the sword tomb. The people of 10,000 Arts sect were even more puzzled. Why would the master of this place leave such a test? Don't you think it's too difficult? Wang Lu said, it's probably because the guardian of 10,000 years ago was not so powerful. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned, and then they realized that this 10,000 feet tall mountain was likely the result of the passage of 10,000 years. Just like a small sapling growing into a towering ancient tree, the guardian of that time may only be a strong enemy for the later inheritor, but now. Zhou frowned. But why can't I feel any spiritual energy? Wang Lu spread out his hands. Because it's dead. Dead? 10,000 years have passed except for vegetative people who could not die. Not to mention the passage of time here is probably not the same as the outside. 10,000 years outside may be doubled or even more in here. Zhou asked again. The guardian is dead, what should we do? Whipping corpses. Wang Lu said, I don't know. Maybe there is no good answer to this question. After all, this sword tomb has been sleeping for too long and has experienced the Dharma-ending catastrophe. Many things can't be seen according to the rules. Even if we really encounter a dead end, we have nothing to say. After that, there was a long silence on the summit. The other three sects naturally wouldn't completely believe what Wang Lu said. The cultivators of Xinjing sect were divided into 5 teams to explore this vast mountain area. A moment later, the people of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun Immortal sect also left. However, everyone agreed to meet here half a day later. Wang Lu shook his head and didn't go down the mountain. Instead, he made a bonfire and began to cook for Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Lu Li was the easiest to take care of. As long as she ate and drank her fill, she could be happy at any time. However, Bai Shixian was still frowning. Senior martial brother, this place's aura is very strange, I can't feel the spirituality of anything. Wang Lu said, this is just the inner space of the sword tomb. It has been sleeping for thousands of years, so how could there be spirituality of anything here? Bai Shixian awkwardly said, things are more complicated than I said. My expression might not be appropriate, in fact. However, before she could continue, Wang Lu had already covered her lips with his hand and shook his head, indicating that she didn't need to say anything. Bai Shixian gawked for a moment. She realized that Wang Lu probably had a deeper idea, and not because he didn't think it through. Immediately, the worry in her heart disappeared, and a smile hung on her face. For a time it was too beautiful to behold. Half a day later, the people of the other 3 sects came back with a complex look. After half a day, they have seen what they wanted to see and tried what they wanted to try. The most radical Xinjing sect people even tried to bombard the mountain with their most destructive immortal method. As a result, they only managed to create a 100-meter deep pit on the steel-like mountain. The power was indeed amazing, but it was completely meaningless. Whipping the corpses didn't count as defeating the guardian. Jiang Lu's heart was filled with bad luck as he strode toward Wang Lu. You have a way, just say it. Wang Lu said, to be honest, there's really no reliable way, but there's a crooked way. If your 3 sects don't have a way, you might as well use it to rescue it. How to do it? First, resurrect it and then kill it? Because the condition is to defeat it, if there's no struggle, it probably can't be counted as defeat. Therefore, first, create the conditions for it to struggle. Jiang Lu angrily said, you're simply indulging in fantasy. Resurrect from the dead? Let alone such a behemoth, even if it's a dead rabbit, do you have the ability to bring its soul back for me to see? A dead person could not be resurrected. Although this was not an absolute theorem in the immortal cultivation world, the difficulty of resurrecting from the dead was very high. It was not something that a group of Shudan stage disciples could easily achieve, let alone the object of resurrection was a tens of thousands of meters tall mountain. Wang Lu said, your thinking is constrained by common sense. In fact, on the other hand, because this big guy's level is much higher than that of a wild rabbit, it's actually easier to achieve the resurrection. Especially since its body has evolved to the extent of being able to support the heavens and the earth, it's very likely that what it needs is just a stimulus. Upon hearing this, Jiang Lu gawked. A faint light flashed through his mind, but he couldn't grasp the details. After all, he was known for his mysterious golden body, so he didn't know much about methods. However, when the others heard Wang Lu's words, they were greatly inspired, especially 10,000 Arts sects Yi Feifei, who beamed with joy. That's right. In fact, the higher the level of existence, the easier it is to have life characteristics. Compared to the wilderness, the mountain spirit is more likely to appear in the immortal cultivation paradise. High-rank spirit object is more likely to turn into a spirit than an ordinary object. And the heaven stone is far more likely to obtain the good fortune of heaven and earth than an ordinary stone. According to this principle, even if this big guy died, after all, it left behind such a powerful body. Perhaps there's really a hope to resurrect it? Jianglu still couldn't agree. It's still a whimsical idea. For such a huge creature, even if it can be resurrected, the amount of magical power required is enormous, which we can't afford. Wang Lu said, therefore this is a last-ditch rescue plan. If you have a better way, I absolutely won't say anything, but do you? Although this method is whimsical, it is, after all, a clear direction that we can strive for. Moreover, everyone here has at least Shudan stage cultivation base. Needless to say, they also have elixirs and elixirs, so a mere magical power supply shouldn't be a problem, right? Jianglu hesitated for a moment and didn't rush to express his position. However, soon the cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect gave their approval. Zhan Zai said, I agree with Brother Wang's plan. Although it sounds absurd, at least it's worth a try. A moment later, Zhou Mumu also nodded. In any case, there's no better way, so we might as well give it a try. Seeing that the three sects have already expressed their attitude, Jianglu went with the flow. That being the case, let's try it according to your idea. 10,000 Arts sect, aren't you all good at all kinds of spells and arrays? Why don't you design a set of implementation plan, and the people of the other sects will cooperate with you? Zhan Zai and the others didn't care about Jianglu's arrogant attitude. Several of them gathered together and gradually immersed themselves in the academic atmosphere. After discussing with each other in high spirits, Zhan Zai concluded, there is indeed a suitable immortal method. If that mountain is regarded as an ordinary creature, we can try to open its good fortune meridian, transforming pure magical power into the creature's good fortune chi and instilling it. If its physical level is high enough, it should have a reaction and condense its spirituality. Yi Feifei added, we have calculated it. Although the magical power required is huge, if the people of the four sects can unite, we can completely afford it. Hai Yunfan said, of course, we also need to pay attention to the degree of control. We resurrect it to defeat it. If possible, it's best to control the resurrection strength to the minimum, only giving it a living state, not giving it the ability to move. Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows. That's right. If after resurrecting it we find that we can't defeat it, that would be a joke. Good, since you have a way, our Kunlun immortal sect will go all out to catch up. Wang Lu also expressed his position. This plan is proposed by my Lingjian school, so naturally we are duty-bound to do it. Finally, Jianglu made his decision. Then it's settled. Everyone hurry up and implement it. Although the Xingjing sect was somewhat bossy with a bureaucratic atmosphere, their action was really amazing. After the plan was finalized, more than 70% of the actual work was completed by Xingjing sect alone, including completing the array according to the diagram, pouring different attributes of pure magical power at the key nodes, and engraving the talismans on the mountain wall of the lofty mountain. Although in the eyes of many people, Xingjing sect's cultivators were nothing more than a group of arrogant nouveau riche, but since they could become the #1 sect in 9 regions, they naturally had their reasons. They didn't have as obvious characteristics as the other 4 super sects, but they won in all aspects. The overall cultivation of their disciples had no shortcomings. Whether it was the method system, body tempering, magical treasure, and even elixirs, Xingjing sect maintained a very high standard. Their comprehensive strength was really beyond the other 4 sections. Especially in the aspect of team organization and mobilization, they were even more powerful. Only the Royal Soldier sect could match them, but their comprehensive strength was far behind. However, even though the disciples of the several sects had come up with their real skills, the preparation work still took a full 3 days to come to an end. No less than 100,000 talismans were engraved on the lofty mountain, and they were connected by magical power ropes, which eventually converged at the foot of the mountain and froze into a mirror-like lake. The huge amount of work was enough to make those Taoist master-level cultivators of ordinary sects to lament their inadequacy. However, in the hands of this group of elite disciples of the 5 uniques, it was completed in 3 days. Good fortune meridian circulation was a marvelous immortal method that used an array to simulate the meridians of a living creature, completing the life energy cycle and thus stimulating its spirituality. The amount of magical power needed to activate the wisdom of a lofty mountain could be imagined, which was also the biggest difficulty in the plan. However, when they put it into practice, they found that it was a bit easier than expected. The magical power of Lingjian schools by Shixian was beyond everyone's imagination. She alone was equivalent to more than half of the group of Xingjing sect. The magical ability of Immortal Beast was really amazing. However, when the lofty mountain slightly trembled under the stimulation of the meridian circulation, causing the earth to shake, no one had the time to marvel at the power of Bai Shixian. Jiang Lu roared, "The Guardian has been resurrected, everyone prepare to fight." Chapter 234. This was a battle that was doomed to be unconventional. Even if the present cultivators were already the most elite group of the 5 uniques of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, their real strength was far beyond what they appeared to be on the surface, and any one of the sects had the power to destroy a city and destroy a country. Even if the Guardian had just been resurrected by the extremely brilliant meridian circulation method and was in its weakest moment, it still seemed too powerful for the disciples of the 4 sections. To defeat this behemoth head-on, one must at least have the magical ability of deity stage, which was far beyond the upper limit of the disciples of the 4 sections. However, to defeat a target, why would they need to do it head-on? A tough and powerful warrior might not be defeated by a heavy hammer or a long sword, but a meat dumpling, or a poisonous mushroom could bring his life to the end. Life, regardless of high or low, was powerful and fragile coexisting. As long as they found the right way to destroy it from the inside, perhaps with just a gentle push, it could make the building collapse. Therefore, the previous 3 days of arrangement of 100,000 talismans all over the mountain was not only to stimulate the life with the meridian circulation method, but more importantly, when the Guardian woke up from its slumber, these 100,000 talismans could reverse the meridian circulation, allowing the magical power to penetrate through the mountain's thick defense, directly extinguishing the vitality within its body, achieving the effect of internal destruction. Of course, achieving internal destruction was not easy. Bestowing life was one thing but plundering was another. After all, the Guardian was a higher life form. The moment its vitality bloomed, it would enter a perfect cycle, constantly healing itself, and expel the harmful existence out of its body. In Wang Lu's words, this was an endless struggle against the Guardian's immune system. Everyone get ready to fight. Jiang Lu's roar was like the roar of spring thunder, with an unquestionable strong penetrating force, which was still clearly audible in the midst of the landslide. However, there was no need for him to say it. Every cultivator of Xingjing sect in the first moment had found their own position. However, they didn't go straight to the sky to confront the Guardian head-on. Instead, they moved the battlefield to another location. They stood on the frozen lake, suppressing the more than 100,000 talismans that were reflected on the surface of the lake. On average, there were more than 4,000 mapping talismans under each person's feet. They needed to use their incomparably precise magic power to control each talisman precisely. It was like an extraordinarily skilled zither player, skillfully plucking the strings of the zither. For a moment, tens of thousands of starlight shone on the surface of the frozen lake, as if the Milky Way was reflecting itself. Meanwhile, innumerable ropes condensed from magical power extended from the surface of the ice to the mountain, faithfully transmitting the changes of the 100,000 talismans to the mountain. It was the latest artificial spirit object developed by the 10,000 Arts sect, the third type of spirit light guide cable or optical cable for short. It transmitted the signal by magical light, and then encoded and decoded it with a special algorithm. It had a very high transmission efficiency and anti-interference ability. Even in the great shaking of the world, it could still maintain the signal transmission without error. Only by gathering the 100,000 talismans on the lofty mountain could it be possible for one person to suppress 4,000 talismans. If that wasn't the case, how could 100,000 talismans resonate with just a few dozen people? While the cultivators of Xingjing sect were busy inputting the spirit light signal to guide the various abilities of the 100,000 talismans, the people of the 10,000 Arts sect were nervously encoding and decoding the 100,000 signals. This kind of work not only required keen and delicate magical power control, but also required high-speed calculation, which only the people of the 10,000 Arts sect could do. As for the cultivators of Kunlun sect, they formed a heavenly Tao reincarnation array in mid-air, giving full play to their profound advantage, continuously pouring down pure magical power and spiritual energy, so that the present cultivators wouldn't have to worry about magical power exhaustion. The 3 people of Lingjian school were the mobile force. In case of any accident, only they could deal with it. This task could be said to be difficult, because, according to the plan, the newly resurrected guardian should have no resistance to the erosion of the reverse meridian. However, it could be said to be easy. Once there was any mistake in the plan, with one slap from this mountain giant, even a peak king pill stage cultivator would be turned into meat paste. The division of the task had been very detailed, but the situation was still out of control in the first place. The moment the Xinjing sect cultivators launched the array, an irresistible resistance was transmitted along the optical fiber. Even though the guardian had just been resurrected and had no consciousness, only instinct, its subconscious struggle was still difficult to bear. At the same time, more than half of the cultivators of Xinjing sect were bleeding from their 7 orifices. Sitting in the center, Jianglu bore the brunt of the injury the most. Beads of blood oozed out from all the pores of his body, which then evaporated into mist due to the extremely high body temperature. His vitality rapidly passed away, but he didn't waver in the slightest. Instead, his body became more firm. Hold on. However, without needing Jianglu to say anything, the cultivators of Xinjing sect, as if by prior agreement, simultaneously burned their innate vitality. Xinjing sect's absolutely strong development strategy in 9 regions had repeatedly made them the most unpopular sect in the eyes of the various sects of the Wanxian League. However, in contrast to their wild posture, when they were needed to shoulder the responsibility, Xinjing sect was often duty-bound. Perhaps it was because of their absolute confidence in their own strength, or perhaps they just wanted to show off their prestige. In general, no matter how dissatisfied they were, it was undeniable that as the big brother of the Wanxian League, Xinjing sect's overall performance was absolutely qualified. However, relying solely on the desperate efforts of Xinjing sect cultivators was obviously not enough to shake the situation. How could dozens of ants do anything to the trampling of a giant elephant? Tiske, we already have something to do, let's get started. Seeing that the situation was beyond his expectation, Wang Lu, without any hesitation, flew straight to the sky with Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Then Bai Shixian made the first move. With the unique magical ability of the immortal beast moon spirit, she gained a resonance with all the living things in this world. As if declaring sovereignty over a piece of barren land, the current mountain spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain easily spread the tentacles of his primordial spirit throughout the vast mountains. Then, in Bai Shixian's perception, a giant black shadow blotted out the sky and the earth, causing people to feel fear at first sight. That was the extremely weak guardian after its resurrection. Its primordial spirit was like a dried-up corpse that had been withered for tens of thousands of years, with a thick aura of death. However, even so, it was still a powerful enemy that no one could resist. Using primordial spirit to attack it would only make it die faster. Therefore, Bai Shixian, with her immortal beast magical ability, turned herself into a primordial spirit bridge to communicate with the guardian, not to injure or defeat it, but to lay the foundation for Wang Lu's next move. She gently put her primordial spirit on the body of the guardian. Because there was no hostility and her presence was too subtle, it didn't arouse the other party's response. Wang Lu coldly said, "Lu Li, prepare the brilliant rushing god sword." Lu Li has already entered the fighting state. Her 2 quick-witted eyes were as calm as ice. Upon hearing Wang Lu's command, her right hand pinched the sword sign and pressed it between her eyebrows, urging her primordial spirit to brew an astonishing sword intent. At this time, her primordial spirit cultivation base has already surpassed the half-virtual half-real stage. Coupled with the extreme strengthening of the brilliant sword heart, after this brilliant rushing god sword intent took shape, it seemed as if it was about to materialize. The surrounding cultivators with keen perception all felt a slight tingling pain. Go. The primordial spirit sword intent responded to the command and went straight to the vital part of the guardian along the bridge that Bai Shixian had set up. The power of this sword strike alone was enough to make the nearby 10,000 arts sect cultivators feel a splitting headache. Moreover, the brilliant rushing god sword intent was enough to defeat the primordial spirit of any of the people present. My goodness. Jianglu, Wang Yuelwanyu, Zhan Zai and the others all felt a chill in their hearts. This Lu Li turned out to have such a killer move. This extremely pure sword intent was sharper and more difficult to guard against than her fire-weak water sword and other 5-element swords. In the future, if they were to encounter it. However, this distraction was only for a moment. The heavy burden on their shoulders did not allow them to be distracted. The pressure from the guardian was not reduced by the slightest bit. Lu Li's earth-shattering sword intent rushed forward, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea. How strong was the primordial spirit of this guardian? However, Wang Lu was still calm. His primordial spirit was connected with Bai Shixian and Lu Li. Just now the effect of the brilliant Russian god sword was still there. Resuscitation of the Guardian. Although the original Guardian was resurrected, its primordial spirit was hazy and still in a coma. All of its actions relied on instinct. However, Lu Li's earth-shattering brilliant Russian god sword intent had the same effect as an alarm clock, which suddenly woke it up. And this was enough. What Wang Lu wanted was for it to wake up, because only a resuscitation of the Guardian could possibly reveal a flaw. Lu Li used the brilliant sword language to help me pass the following message. Sword language was not the unique skill of his big sister Zhu Shiryao. Lu Li, whose talent in the way of the sword was also at the peak, also had the ability to use sword language. Moreover, her sword language was easier to understand than Zhu Shiryao's, so it didn't need the other side to have the talent in the way of the sword to understand. And now, the trump card that Wang Lu had prepared was Lu Li's sword language. Using Bai Shishuan's magical ability to build a bridge and the brilliant Russian god sword intent to awaken the Guardian, all in order to let it hear their conversation. As long as there was an opportunity for communication, the space available was too big. Azure, I'll say it later and you'll use the sword language to relay it. During the process, I want you to circulate the clear heart mantra at the same time and calm your mind. You don't have to think about the meaning of what I say. You just have to pass it straight to the Guardian. Okay. Although there were thousands of doubts in her heart, and she couldn't understand the intention of Wang Lu's instruction, Lu Li didn't ask a single word. Without hesitation, she nodded and began to use the clear heart technique. Suddenly, her clear heart seemed to be covered with frost and snow, becoming cold and tranquil, showing an unprecedented state of emptiness. Then, hearing Wang Lu's primordial spirit transmission, Lu Li, without hesitation, relied on her instinctive understanding and turned it into the brilliant sword language. Then, with a wave of her slender hand, she stimulated the sword intent and passed the following content to the Guardian word for word. Grandson. Your AF * King F * Cur. Your mother was beeped by a dog. You came out of the beep. Your beep was beeped by a beep. An indescribable viciousness was transmitted through the channel of the primordial spirit in the form of sword language. After a moment of silence, the Guardian released a world-destroying fury. It was a roar that came directly from her primordial spirit, the supreme heart fire. And at the moment when the heart fire set the prairie ablaze, Bai Shishuan very cleverly hid her primordial spirit between the mountains and the earth, avoiding being caught in the crossfire. As for Lu Li, who directly faced the wrath of the Guardian. Hey, you want to hurt someone in front of me? A dazzling golden sword shadow, like an eternally motionless mountain rock, unwaveringly isolated the boundless heart fire of the Guardian. Like an eyesore that blocked the way, it protected Lu Li behind him. This was also a sword of the essence soul. Wang Lu had recently mastered it, the formless immovable sword. Receiving the perfect protection from Wang Lu, Lu Li was oblivious to everything around her. While urging the Clear Heart Sutra, she continued to talk according to the content of the sound transmission from Wang Lu. You're a beep, your mother is a beep, your father is a beep, and your master is also a beep. The primordial spirit fire was blocked outside, and the vicious voice continued. The Guardian was boiling with anger. All of its attention was focused on Wang Lu and Lu Li. This split second of distraction broke the balance that was originally maintained by instinct, which immediately affected the state of the body. There's a flaw. Jiang Lu, who was standing in the front line, and Zhan Zai, who was constantly monitoring the state and deducing the data, simultaneously roared. The next moment, the light on the ice lake suddenly intensified several times. Everyone, regardless of everything, seized this rare flaw and launched an unprecedented fierce offensive with 100,000 talismans. Chapter 235. In his 10 years of immortal cultivation, this was the first time that Wang Lu encountered a strong opponent that was truly suitable for a professional adventurer. First, the opponent's strength was strong enough. If it was a fair fight in the arena, even 100 Wang Lu wouldn't be able to stop the Guardian's attack. Second, the opponent's weakness was obvious enough. With the 100,000 talismans reverse meridian circulation method, the magical power directly penetrated into the Guardian's body. Third, the opponent's weakness was stupid enough. Because it had just been resurrected, the Guardian's primordial spirit was confused, and its mind was in chaos. It simply couldn't think like a normal creature, and its earth-shattering power couldn't be displayed. Moreover, it was easy to be calculated by some simple and ridiculous tricks. If it were any normal opponent, it would be impossible for them to fall into an irrepressible rage because of dirty words. However, after hearing the sword language, the Guardian ignored the great crisis of the 100,000 talismans invasion on its body and set off the monstrous heart fire to deal with Lu Li. And Wang Lu propped up his non-phase unmovable heart sword, firmly blocking the way, motionless like a mountain. However, the Guardian unexpectedly didn't know how to change its target. It still locked on Lu Li and continued to urge the heart fire to push and spread forward. Although its power was impressive, it was not aimed at Wang Lu, therefore Wang Lu was able to resist it with ease. In professional terms, this was the magical effect of blocking position. Taunting, blocking position, pulling the hatred, this was the entire job of the three people of Lingjian School. As a mobile force, Wang Lu didn't need to fight the Guardian to the death. He just needed to create the output condition for the rest of his teammates. And his teammates didn't let him down. Xingjing sect, Kunlun sect, and 10,000 Arts sect people jointly exerted their strength. Under the infusion of powerful magical power, the 100,000 talismans were stimulated one by one, creating one strong destruction after another in the Guardian's body. The Guardian's body continued to tremble, and cracks appeared on the surface of the mountain. Not long after, it seemed to be covered with a vast layer of spider web. Gravel and sand slid down like a waterfall, and the Guardian's body seemed to be surrounded by a layer of grayish-yellow mist. Of course, the destruction inside the mountain was 100 times more intense than on the surface. However, the Guardian turned a blind eye to this, because in its ignorant knowledge, its greatest hatred was not the pain in its body, but the vicious curse that the little bug transmitted through the sharp sword language. Unfortunately, its ignorant mind could not allow it to think too much, so it only clumsily activated the heart fire, trying to burn the sword language and the little bug, completely ignoring the fact that its body was rapidly falling apart. The stalemate lasted for a long time. Although the destructive power of the 100,000 talismans was very powerful, the Guardian's vitality was equally astonishing. It turned out that the disciples of the four sects had underestimated the Guardian's strength. The people of Lingjian School had played a role beyond expectation. Wang Lu, with his professional adventurer's means, firmly attracted the Guardian's attention. As for the rest of the people, they only needed to concentrate on the reverse meridian circulation method to destroy the Guardian's vitality. It stood to reason that if everything went well they should be able to kill it soon. However, no one thought that the Guardian had just been resurrected and was on the verge of death. They obviously had 3 days of arrangement and 100,000 talismans to magnify the destructive power of the cultivators by thousands of times, but in the end, when Jianglu and the others were almost exhausted, the Guardian fell down with a loud bang. With the continuous accumulation of internal destruction, the Guardian's vitality finally came to an end. From the top of the mountain, a large amount of lava and dust gushed out and went straight to the sky, and then the mountain was quickly covered with a layer of gray color. The mountain suddenly stopped, and its height was compressed by a section. At this point the battle ended. Everyone felt a burst of amazement. According to the original plan, all the arrangements had a considerable amount of surplus, and the margin of error was very high. However, the actual situation was that the margin of error in killing the Guardian was almost zero. Even the Lingjian School had to perform exceptionally to barely take down the opponent. Among them, if there was a slight mistake in any of the links, the result would be total annihilation. What a terrifying opponent. Feeling the signal from the ice lake array that the Guardian's vitality was gone, Jianglu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He then wiped the black blood from his mouth and nose and sincerely sighed with emotion. The Guardian's vitality was simply unimaginable. Perhaps in the Wanxian League, even in the Royal Soldier sect, which was famous for its powerful body, only a few people could be comparable to it. Fortunately, they didn't need to be enemies with the Guardian at its peak. However, even so, the cultivators of the four sects had to cooperate with each other in order to barely pass this test. While recollecting the battle just now, Jianglu had to admit that it was impossible to defeat this Guardian by relying on the strength of Xingjing sect alone, and this was just the 4th level of the Sword Tomb. The cooperation of the four sects seemed to be just a joke at first, but since the difficulty of the Sword Tomb far exceeded the expectation, even if they joined forces with the other 3 sects, it was also a good choice. In the battle just now, although the main force was Xingjing sect, the role of any other sect was pivotal. Thinking to this, Jianglu changed his original overbearing attitude and said, "Everyone take a break and restore your magical power as soon as possible. If any of the fellow Taoists here has been injured by the resonance just now, we have the best healing elixir here, please feel free to use it." Although his tone was still somewhat superior, it was rare for Xingjing sect to show such a generous attitude, so the cultivators of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect had no reason to refuse. After exchanging greetings for a while, they became friends with each other, and the atmosphere gradually warmed up. Only the people of Lingjian school were still maverick, coldly hiding on the side, completely not participating in the greetings. Just now, in the fierce battle, Wang Lu and the other two people took great credit. However, under the protection of Nanfei's sword, the three of them were actually unscathed. Compared to the bleak Xingjing sect people, they were simply noble and elegant. Their number was the smallest, but their style seemed to be stronger than Xingjing sect people. Jianglu cast a glance at them and inwardly sneered. The people of Lingjian school indeed had some means, but even Xingjing sect people could put down their arrogance when needed. If they were so maverick in the joint action of the four sects, they would only end up being isolated. Of course, in the action they might not deliberately frame each other, but in the final distribution of the spoils, the isolated party would definitely suffer a big loss. However, this was a misunderstanding. Wang Lu and the others had important things to discuss. Lu Li, you said you found something, what do you mean? Lu Li earnestly said, at the last moment before the Guardian's life was cut off, I clearly felt that it seemed to have released two different but equally strong emotions to me. It seemed to be regret but also relief like. Lu Li awkwardly wrinkled her brows. She wanted to describe it more vividly, but found that her ability to express it was somewhat unable to keep up. Wang Lu was silent for a moment and then tried to explain, resuscitation after thousands of years of sleep, but before it could experience more of life, it was sent into the darkness again. Of course there would be regret. As for relief, it should have died a long time ago, it's just that it couldn't die thoroughly. Now that it's dead thoroughly, perhaps it could re-enter the reincarnation cycle, which is not bad, so it's relieved. For such an explanation, Lu Li found it difficult to understand, and even more difficult to accept, but she didn't know what to say. In the silence, Bai Shixian expressed her opinion, Senior brother, I think we shouldn't kill it. Wang Lu asked, what's the reason? Bai Shixian said, because it didn't do anything bad. The hare and pheasant didn't do anything bad, but they still ended up in the human stomach. This is the law of nature, so it can't explain anything. But, in general, do you think I did something wrong? Bai Shixian hesitated. Not really. It's just that I always feel that this guardian is really pitiful. Perhaps it's because we're both mountain spirits. Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Wang Lu also touched her head. Don't think too much. Although you're born smart, not hopelessly stupid like little Lu Li, it's still too early for you to think about these things. Lu Li protested, I'm not stupid. Wang Lu looked at Lu Li, really? Then I'll give you a question. If you can figure it out, then you're smart. Prove that any even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of two prime numbers. Okay, take your time to think about it. Okay. Then, ignoring Lu Li, Wang Lu also fell into deep thought. This is only the 4th level, but the difficulty has already broken the limit. Is there a problem with the way to play or? However, just when Wang Lu vaguely grasped something, suddenly, a burst of roar of rolling rocks surged. A strong shock came from under their feet, causing everyone to simultaneously stop their conversation and turn their eyes to the mountain not far away. As the guardian's corpse, after the lava erupted and the mountain shrunk, the mountain took on a gray color. Everyone thought that this was the end, but unexpectedly, there was another change. The mountain suddenly swayed, causing a violent earthquake in a radius of dozens of miles. And the cracks on the surface of the mountain, driven by an unknown force, continued to expand. Then the earth suddenly bent down as if a hole was opened at the foot of the mountain. The whole mountain sunk down at a jaw-dropping speed. Even the volcanic ash that spewed into the sky fell back. In just a moment, all that was left in front of everyone was a plain, as well as a clear sky. That towering mountain seemed to have never existed. Jianglu looked around in bewilderment and guessed, is this a sign that the door to the next level is about to open? Zhou somewhat dejectedly said, that big guy is useless, so he died without a whole corpse? Zhan Zai excitedly guessed, is this the internal recycling mechanism of the sword tomb? Unexpectedly, the cultivators from more than 10,000 years ago have such an advanced idea. This is a very important discovery, and it's necessary to revise the relevant records. While they were talking, suddenly on the plain where the mountain disappeared, 8 stone doors appeared in a circle. Each stone door was engraved with a simple and unadorned character. Although after thousands of years the characters had changed a lot, there was no lack of knowledgeable people present so they could recognize them at a glance. Filial piety, fraternity, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame. Chapter 236. Filial piety, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, honor, and shame? When they saw these 8 words, the people present were stunned. Even those with relatively weak knowledge knew that these 8 words were the 8 virtues of the 9 regions that had been passed down for more than 10,000 years, the 8 virtues put forward by the sages a long time ago. But at this time the 8 virtues appeared. Could it be that the master of this sword tomb was the great sage who put forward the 8 virtues? That couldn't be, right? They never heard that the great sage was a sword cultivator. Then what were these 8 doors? Did they have to find the most important one among the 8 doors in order to enter the next level? But these 8 virtues were not superior or inferior. Or did they have to randomly choose one as long as they felt confident in that one? While many of the cultivators were in doubt, that indifferent and stiff voice once again sounded in everyone's mind. The legacy of the sword god should not be passed on to the heretical path, and the successor should have good virtues. However, morality changes with the times, changes with the situation. In times of peace, people are gentle, kind, respectful, and thrifty. In troubled times of war, there are people who exchange their children for food. I don't know what the world will be like after thousands of years, and what morality will be like. However, I know that virtue is relative. Therefore, based on the 8 virtues of the sages, I set up 8 tests. The one with the most virtues wins and the winner passes. The one with the most virtues wins and the winner passes? There was a lot of information in this paragraph, and the most important part was the last 2 sentences. 8 gates, 8 virtues. The person who occupied more of them would be able to pass. For a moment, everyone fell into deep thought and no one said a word. After a while, Hai Yunfan of the 10,000 Arts sect shook his head and exclaimed, "What a powerful senior. He actually designed the knockout test. He's really a master at grasping people's mind." Wang Lu chuckled. Yes, they really have grasped the key of morality. There is comparison, there is morality. To be able to enter this ancient sword tomb and reach this point, whether it's in the past or now, they must be the elite of that time. Using them as the moral yardstick, the difference would not be too far. Then, a competition mechanism is established to select the relatively higher moral character from these people, which is indeed easier to select the real moral role model. Hai Yunfan said, "That's right. Perhaps in some turbulent times, when etiquette is broken, people's hearts are evil, and there are no saints in the world, but as long as one has a little more virtue than the people around him, it's enough. This is really an excellent social problem and it's worth studying." The cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect nodded. Among them Yi Feifei Zhao Jiangyuan, and the others were eager to give it a try. They couldn't wait to consult the ancient books and establish the model. Jianglu of Xingjing sect couldn't stand it anymore. He coldly snorted and interrupted, "Is this the time to admire? The victors would pass. In other words, the losers would not pass. How many victors were there in this round? 1, 2. How many people do we have here? 30? 40? Zhou also said, "This checkpoint is really strange. Why did they have to design this kind of competition mechanism? Must someone be eliminated first?" As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly froze. Zhou was a straightforward person, so she inadvertently pointed out a sensitive topic. After all, the 4 sects were not of one mind. Just now, in the fight with the Guardian, they finally established a cooperative relationship. However, in this sword tomb steel, the one with the most virtues would win, which made the cooperative relationship seem precarious. If there was a win, there would be a loss. After this round, someone would inevitably be eliminated. Moreover, it was very likely that most people would be eliminated. Thus, what kind of cooperation was there? After a while, Jianglu inwardly made a decision and coldly said, "Humph, that's fine. In any case, in the end, someone would be eliminated." Zhan Zai said, "That's not necessarily true. There are 8 sects here and we have 4 sections. If we do a simple division, as long as each sect gets 2 virtues, wouldn't we be able to pass the test together?" Jianglu ridiculed, "You people of 10,000 Arts sect always boast of being smart, but how come you don't use your brain when you speak? If we can pass the test by equal distribution, aren't we also equal now? Each side has 0 virtues, so why don't we see the next door open?" Zhan Zai was suddenly at a loss for words. Jianglu's countenance turned serious as he said in a sinking voice, "The inheritance of this sword tomb is not a gentle and amiable child's play. From the 2nd level of the sword tomb, it's full of killing intent. Just now, in the fight with the Guardian, we were almost wiped out. After experiencing this, Don't tell me you still can't see our situation? If we want to continue to move forward, we must have the awareness to overcome all obstacles, to break our heads and bleed and even to perish. This trial of the 8 virtues will definitely require us to fight and fight, just like how the primal land rears goo and trample on the corpses of others to obtain victory. This theory was indeed persuasive, but there were also many people who disagreed. Yi Feifei couldn't help but open her mouth to argue. However, before they could say anything, Wang Lu lightly said, "We haven't even pushed the door open. What's the use of just talking at the door?" Everyone didn't delay and directly walked toward the filial piety gate. Along the way, Hai Yunfan and Wang Lu's eyes gently touched, and then, as if by prior agreement, they simultaneously smiled. A few days ago, the covenant between the two of them was finally going to play its role. Actually, what Jianglu said just now was right. In the Sword Tomb's inheritance trial, each level seemed cold and ruthless. Perhaps it was really like raising a poisonous insect, where the participants would fight each other to the death in order to determine the final winner. However, it's good that you're clear about this in your heart. Why bother saying it out loud? Xingjing's sect was the only big sect, and if they really fought, none of the other sects would be their opponent. Thus, the situation would inevitably force the other 3 sects to join forces. What Xingjing's sect relied on was nothing more than being driven by the environment. The other 3 sects also had to scheme against each other, and thus couldn't cooperate in good faith. In fact, from the point of view of the vast majority of cases in which the weak joined forces against the strong, most of them ended in the victory of the strong. There was no other reason than those who would rather fight against the flood than to give up the immediate benefits were the mainstream in history. Perhaps there were bystanders who side with emotion. How could those people be so stupid? And in fact, they were that stupid. However, this time Jianglu miscalculated. At least, the foundation of the cooperation between Spirit Sword Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect was very solid. There was no infighting. Because Hai Yunfan had long made up his mind to listen to Wang Lu's instructions from the beginning to the end, without any second thoughts. A few days ago, the importance of the covenant was perfectly reflected. The most important one was that the final benefit should be divided according to the contribution of each party. In other words, even if only one person reached the end and got all the benefits according to the covenant, he would have to distribute it to the other teammates who fell in front of him. If it was difficult to distribute the treasure, the sect would compensate. Therefore, Hai Yunfan didn't care about who could reach the end. If the 10,000 Arts Sect could pass, it would naturally be good. If not, it would be a good choice to fully cooperate with Wang Lu to strive for victory and then sit back and wait for the bonus. And based on the current situation, the best choice for the 10,000 Arts Sect was to trust the judgment of Wang Lu. No matter how many disputes he had, Wang Lu had never tore up the covenant. On the contrary, he was a man of his word, and he always took care of his own people. In fact, in Hai Yunfan's view, among the 8 virtues, Wang Lu had at least occupied 2 of them. It was just that, judging from the situation of this Sword Tomb trial, perhaps it wouldn't be easy to win the 2 virtues. Before long, the group of people arrived at the front of the stone door. The stone door rumbled open, revealing a deep and bottomless dark passage. "I'll go first." Wang Lu lifted the sword of Mount Kuan, and his non-phase sword light bloomed as he rushed to enter the door. Wang Yu and Wang Yun of Xingjing's sect slightly hesitated, but they didn't immediately stop him. After all, no one knew what the world behind the door was like. Was it a test of the heart demon illusion or something else? Since Wang Lu was willing to act as the vanguard, and his non-phase sword was also famous for being good at defense, it would be good for him to explore the way. After Wang Lu, it was naturally Lu Li Xingjing sect and finally Kunlun Immortal sect and 10,000 Arts sect. After the group of people entered the stone door, the thick slate slowly closed, covering the dark passage. It also cut off the connection between inside and outside. However, no one was surprised by this. In the passage, Wang Lu took the lead. However, after walking for a while, there were no guardians blocking the way, nor were there any sinister traps. The front of the passage gradually opened up until the end, where a narrow stone chamber was the end. The stone chamber was not big, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. When Wang Lu looked inside, he immediately exclaimed, "What the F***ck?" Parents and children must correspond to one another, not one to many or many to one. 2. Once the identity card is selected, it will be completely bound and cannot be changed. 3. Each person has and can only have one identity card. 4. parenting and filial piety can only be performed once. Once one party refuses to perform the parenting or filial piety, it will be regarded as giving up the trial. The process of nurturing and filial piety is irreversible, and gifts cannot be recovered. 6. Any act that violates the rules of the trial will be regarded as a violation of the rules and will be disqualified. The rules were not long, but after reading the rules, everyone cursed in their hearts. What was going on? Zhou was the most puzzled. What kind of filial piety trial is this? Wang Lu also sighed. The owner of the sword tomb must have lived in an era with distorted values. How could he design such a ridiculous rule? Regardless of whether it reflects filial piety or not, as soon as this rule comes out, half of the people will be directly cut off. Some people who were slow in thinking asked subconsciously, cut off half of the people? Wang Lu said, look carefully, only filial piety can pass the trial. Only children can be filial piety. Children and parents correspond to one another. It is clear that those who choose the parent card will be eliminated. A few people who were quick to take the round card suddenly stopped and understood. Yes, parents chose the parent card. As parents, how can they be filial piety? Regardless of whether they had thought of this before or not, after listening to Wang Lu's explanation of the rules, they all had their own ideas and began to be silent. While everyone was silent, Wang Lu said, however, being eliminated is not entirely a bad thing. According to the rules, those who choose the parent card will get twice the gift from their children. This will undoubtedly make a lot of money, which can be regarded as compensation for being eliminated. Seeing everyone's thoughtful look, Wang Lu smirked and said, if there is a sinister person, you can also use this parent card as a license to plunder. For example, if I fancy fellow Taoist Xingjing sect's yin and yang treasure chest, and I only want the low-rank spiritual treasure sword of Mount Kuan as a gift, fellow Taoist Xingjing sect must return it with double the value, and I can get that middle-rank spiritual treasure. Isn't that very profitable? Don't even think about it. The Wangyue siblings angrily shouted in unison. Aha, of course I'm just joking. I also like my family's sword of Mount Kuan, so I don't intend to give up. With that, Wang Lu continued to size up the Xingjing sect's cultivators with malicious intent. Then, from another point of view, this is also a shortcut for the local tyrants to spend money to pass this trial. You see, in this trial, half of the people must be eliminated, but no one wants to be the other half, right? Although as children, to fulfill their filial piety, no one here is a poor ghost, right? Everyone has to compete, each using their own means. Who dares to say that they will be able to laugh in the end? However, if some people are willing to pay enough price, perhaps they can avoid a lot of pointless fights and safely pass this trial. The Xingjing sect's cultivators looked at each other and chose to be silent. Although Wang Lu's statement was malicious, if one carefully thought about it, there was nothing wrong with it. Right now, in this filial piety trial, regardless of whether it had anything to do with filial piety from the point of view of passing this trial, it was indeed very cruel. There was no room for debate. Because of the rules, half of the people who participated in the trial would be directly eliminated. However, at this time it seemed like, for the sake of insurance, Xingjing sect sent 8 people to enter the trial, but this time they were caught in their own trap. The 4 sects had a total of 14 people, so the maximum number of people who could pass the trial was 7. Even if they could suppress the other 3 sects, making Wang Lu and the others have no choice but to hold the parent card and give up the trial, the quota was still not enough. Wangyue's siblings communicated with each other through primordial spirit. Wanyun said, "Sister, what do you think?" "I think there's no problem with Wang Lu's statement, at least on the surface. Let's think of a way to make the other 3 sects give up. As for our own problem, let junior brother Ting sacrifice himself." However, Wanyu didn't dare to think of things so lightly. Our own problem is easy to discuss, and it's not difficult for us to distribute it. I'm afraid that there's a conspiracy behind what Wang Lu just said. The rules of this filial piety trial are too strange and people can't understand it. Although on the surface, as long as we find half of the people who will be sacrificed, we can let the other half pass. However, those 3 sects are not easy to deal with. How could they be willing to hold the parent card and give up the trial? Under this rule, coercion by force doesn't have much significance. After they hold the parent card, if they don't designate our people, we can't do anything about it. Wanyun said, then we can lure them with benefits. As long as we show our Xingjing sect's unwillingness to give up, coupled with sufficient compensation, they have no reason to be stubborn. They're not like those royal soldier sect who don't know what's good for them and can't distinguish right from wrong. As long as they're willing to talk about benefits, I think we can always give them a price tag that's enough to convince them. Hai Yunfan gawked. Do I really want to fight for the children card? Isn't that nonsense? If I don't fight for the children card, how can I be filial? Hai Yunfan explained, the main thing is, according to my understanding of Brother Wang just now, you said those high-sounding words, but your real intention is likely to be reversed. However, since Brother Wang said so, then we'll try our best to fight for it. It's just that, according to the rules, isn't the children card designated by the parents' card? If you can't directly fight for the children card, then strive to let other people get the parents' card, and then designate you as the children card. With that, Wang Lu slightly sneered. Just like what Xingjing sect is about to do. Hai Yunfan sighed. Unexpectedly, the test after the filial piety gate actually evolved into such a situation. What kind of era of destruction did the master of this sword tomb live in? Yes, the parents' card is directly out of the game while the children card can pass. It's called filial piety, but it's actually a fraud. Chapter 238. After Wang Lu ended his conversation with Hai Yunfan, the silent atmosphere in the stone chamber was quickly broken. Wang Yuelwanyu of Xingjing sect took half a step forward. As her figure moved, her willowy eyebrows slightly raised, her delicate facial features stretched out, and her agile temperament suddenly turned sharp. Wang Lu. The woman spoke coldly, and her voice carried a trace of unquestionable iciness. Earlier you said that if some people were willing to pay a sufficient price, they would be able to avoid many pointless battles and safely pass through this trial, right? Now that my Xingjing sect is willing to pay enough price, I wonder if you are willing to avoid the unnecessary fight? Wang Lu gawked for a moment. Your Xingjing sect's method of negotiation is really simple and crude. Wang Yuelwanyu said, yes, the Xingjing sect is determined to win this first pass of the 8 virtues. There are a total of 14 people from the 4 sects, but only 7 people can pass this pass. We have already discussed it internally. Junior brother Ting Fei will sacrifice himself to hold the parent card. However, the remaining 7 parent cards will have to be handled by Kunlun sect, 10,000 Arts sect, and Spirit Sword sect. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the stone room immediately became somewhat tense. This Wang Yuelwanyu usually looked light and graceful, but who would have thought that the moment she opened her mouth, she would be so domineering? Compared to her senior brother Power King, she was not much inferior. There were only 7 spots in the first pass of the 8 virtues, yet Xingjing sect unexpectedly did not intend to give up any of them. How could the other 3 sects endure this? Of course, although Xingjing sect was overbearing, they were not robbers. With that, Wang Yuelwanyu paused for a moment, and then added, of course Xingjing sect will not let you suffer a loss, there will be enough compensation. Zhou Mumu angrily said, compensation? What a big tone. I want to hear how much price your Xingjing sect can pay to dare to ask us to give up the inheritance of the sword tomb. Wang Yuelwanyu said, what a joke. When did this sword tomb inheritance become the possession of your Kunlun Immortal Mountain? You make it sound like if you don't give up, others won't be able to get it. Whether you admit it or not, in this sword tomb expedition among the 4 sects, my Xingjing sect has the biggest chance of winning. All we want is for the process to be more stable and peaceful. Exchanging benefits is always better than fighting to the death. Of course, if you refuse to accept, you must shed all pretense of cordiality. Xingjing sect is not afraid of anyone. In that case, fellow Taoist Zhou Mumu, are you prepared for war? Do you have the awareness to challenge my Xingjing sect? While speaking, Wang Yuelwanyu's imposing manner became increasingly swift and fierce. Her rainbow-colored feather dress blossomed with a dazzling and sharp brilliance, and the nimble feathers at the hem of her skirt trembled like blades. For a moment, the red-crowned crane transformed into a golden eagle, and a murderous aura assaulted everyone's faces. Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows, not to be outdone. She came from Kunlun Immortal sect, the ancestor of the immortal path in 9 regions. When had she ever been provoked like this? Let's fight then. Do you think I'm afraid of you? A mere 17th-ranked successor disciple dares to be so arrogant? If it was your Qianghua, then it would be more appropriate. Just as his voice fell, he heard Wang Yuelwanyun's mocking voice, ha! Do you think you deserve to name senior sister Qianghua? No wonder Kunlun Immortal Mountain is the ancestor of the immortal Tao, but it is declining day by day. Its disciples simply do not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Zhou Mumu's anger flared up. She immediately unleashed her life-source spiritual treasure, the Origin Vajra ring, and used the innate essence of her Shudan to refine the brilliance of this spiritual treasure, wanting to trap Wang Yue's siblings. Wang Yuelwanyu would not sit still and wait for death. The siblings teamed up to summon the yin and yang treasure chest. The yin and yang qi lingered around the chest. As soon as the lid was opened, a terrifying disaster that would make countless people's complexion change would surge out from the chest. Seeing that the battle was about to begin, Wang Lu helplessly shook his head, took 2 steps forward, unleashed his non-phase sword light and stood between the 2 sides. Under the sword of Mount Kuan, his sword defense soared to more than 10 feet. In the narrow stone room, it completely separated Zhou Mumu and Wang Yue's siblings. The 2 sides stared at each other, but found that no matter how they secretly urged their magical power, under the block of Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense, their magical power could not move forward at all. Both sides were inwardly aghast. In recent years this Wang Lu was indeed famous for his invincible defense in the same stage, but who among the people present was not a top expert in the same stage? How could the elites of the 5 uniques be ordinary? It was a common thing for them to challenge others in a higher realm. For example, almost everyone had the capital to be invincible in the same realm. Therefore, although they did not look down on Wang Lu, they did not think that his defense could really be invincible in the same realm. Moreover, everyone's realm was not the same. Wang Lu was a low-level Shudan, while the Wang Yue siblings and Zhou Mumu were high-level Shudan. However, these 3 high-level Shudan still seemed a bit weak in front of the non-phase sword defense. Once the 2 sides felt weak, the hostile atmosphere suddenly weakened a bit. After Wang Lu established his might with his sword, he took advantage of the situation and scolded, "Fight! Fight! Fight! You only know how to fight. You guys are out of your minds, how dare you fight at this time?" With that, Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed at the stone wall. "I have translated the words above for you, who still doesn't recognize it. What is the 5th paragraph of the 2nd article written? Behavior that violates the rules of the trial is regarded as a violation of the rules and will be disqualified. Do you think that fighting here is in line with the rules of the trial? Did the sword tomb open these 8 trials just to let you guys roll around like monkeys?" As soon as this remark came out, the 2 sides who were still angry were suddenly shocked. The chill in their hearts immediately dispersed and they calmed down. Zhou Mumu put away her diamond ring, and the Wang Yue siblings also put away their treasure chests. Wang Lu sneered and said, "If you want to fight, then you 2 should quickly fight. Fight until your brains are all over the ground, and then you will all be kicked out of the filial piety gate by the sword tomb. My junior sister and I just happened to pick up a bargain. She will help me pass the trial easy and stress-free." Having said that, naturally no one had the heart to fight again. The 2 sides turned around with an indignant expression. However, when they turned around, the Wang Yue siblings revealed a trace of anxiety. The development of things was different from what they expected. This Wang Lu really knew how to make trouble. From the beginning, the Wang Yue siblings didn't intend to fight with Zhou Mumu and the others. They were not really stupid who would be willing to fight to the death here. Even if the comprehensive strength of Xingjing's sect was a notch above the opponent, they would have to pay a great price to win. Xingjing's sect just needed to show their attitude. In order to compete for the qualification to pass the filial piety gate, they did not hesitate to fight. Using power to oppress people was more in line with the interests of Xingjing's sect than using power to oppress people. The Wang Yue siblings thought that with their strength combined with their treasure chests, it was enough to suppress any side present and thus gain the upper hand. However, unexpectedly, the yin and yang qi of the spiritual treasure was firmly suppressed by the non-phase sword light. In the end, it was neither Xingjing's sect nor Kunlun's sect that overwhelmed everyone, but rather Lingjian's school. Wang Lu's defensive sword was sharper than any rumor. Such an opponent was not necessarily terrible but the most hateful. They may not be good at other things but they were absolutely superb at stirring shit. However, this was just the beginning, let's just wait and see. After the fight was interrupted by Wang Lu's sword, the contradiction returned to the negotiation table. How should the 7 spots be distributed among the 14 people? The 4 sects began to negotiate around this topic. Wang Yuelwanyu, on behalf of Xingjing's sect, snatched the chair of the meeting and said, "Next, let's ask the representatives of the 4 sects to put forward their own plan, and then we will negotiate to solve it." Wang Lu, looking at your confident look, "Why don't you go first?" Wang Lu didn't refuse. "It's very simple, out of the 7 spots, our spirit sword sect wants 2, and the remaining 5 can be freely distributed among you." Wang Yuelwanyu angrily said, "Nonsense." Wang Lu said, "No matter how nonsense it is, it's still in line with the procedure, in line with the standard of democracy and freedom. You're so flustered and exasperated, could it be that you're a supporter of autocratic dictatorship?" Wang Yuelwanyu said, Since Lingjian school doesn't have the sincerity to negotiate, then there's no need for you to continue to speak. Let's listen to the opinions of the other two sections. With that, she wanted to exclude Wang Lu from the negotiation table. However, Wang Lu didn't care at all. This kind of nonsense negotiation was time-consuming and laborious, and it wouldn't have a good result. He simply didn't want to participate in it. Therefore, as soon as he came up, he made a big move to clear the screen, leaving the other three sects to continue to waste time on the negotiation table. And the next development was as expected. Each of the three sects' proposals would always be vetoed by the others. Even Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect didn't have a very good tacit understanding, and they often undermined each other. During this period, Hai Yunfan repeatedly looked at Wang Lu, hoping to get a helping hand. However, he saw that the latter had no interest in participating at all. Of course not. Even if they could unite the power of Spirit Sword Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, they couldn't be compared to Xingjing Sect. In fact, as long as Xingjing Sect vetoed their proposal, any proposal would not pass. Of course, Xingjing Sect would always be vetoed by the other two sects, and they were also unable to pass. This absurd negotiation lasted for a long time, and the three sects were somewhat exhausted. At this time, they looked at the free and unfettered Wang Lu and gnashed their teeth in hatred. However, this matter couldn't be dragged on indefinitely, there must be a solution. Wang Lu saw that someone on the negotiation table had even taken out the proposal of drawing lots, and inwardly said that it was almost time to make a move. They didn't want to fight, so they talked. If they couldn't negotiate, then they still had to fight. Moreover, with the anger of the negotiation, it would often be a real fight, a beating until their heads were bleeding, which was completely different from the deterrent behavior of the two sects at the beginning. This was also good. After breaking up several sects, he could take the opportunity to reap the benefits. In any case, it was the other three sects who drew the hatred on the negotiation table, which had little to do with him. Even if they wanted to fight, it wouldn't be his turn to take the lead. However, just when the scene had gradually fallen into a deadlock and was ready to jump at each other's throats, he suddenly heard Lu Li suddenly jump up and let out a pleasantly surprised cry. Great! For a time, the three parties on the negotiation table forgot their hatred and looked at her. Wang Lu was also curious. What's great? Lu Li's face was full of joy as she bounced and giggled in front of Wang Lu. Hee, before I entered the room, didn't you give me a question to think about? I've been thinking about it. Wang Lu simply prostrated himself in admiration. What the F***ck, have you been thinking about that question just now? Yes, in order to prove that I'm not a fool. I figured it out. Wang Lu was stunned, and then his eyes almost popped out in surprise. You figured it out? An even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of two prime numbers? Lu Li stuck out her plump chest and confidently said, That's right. Wang Lu felt that the world before him was spinning as if the whole world was not real. At this time, when he looked at that charming and lovely girl with a proud face, he felt that she was not the cute pet of the Spirit Sword Mountain, but a grandmaster of a generation. Perhaps after hundreds of thousands of years, the so-called Fengyin Taoist master and the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Mountain would have disappeared in the long river of history, but Lu Li would certainly be remembered forever because of her earth-shattering mathematical talent. When the future generations mention this story, they would say, Once upon a time there was a Spirit Sword Mountain, and on that mountain there was a Lu Li. What the hell, this story is not right. Wang Lu resisted the urge to blow his head off. He inwardly said, I must have actual proof. Thus, he tremblingly asked, What about the proof process? Lu Li proudly said, I just tried from 2 to 1 billion, and each number can be decomposed into 2 prime numbers. What the hell, you used the exhaustive method to prove it? Moreover, in less than half an hour, you've already exhausted 1 billion? I'm awesome, right? You're indeed awesome, although it's awesome in another sense. But this can't be considered as proof. Upon hearing this, Lu Li gawked and then hurriedly asked, Why not? I've tried to reach 1 billion. Above 1 billion there are still 10 billion, 100 billion and even infinite billions. A mere 1 billion is really not enough, Lu Li pitifully argued, but I've tried very hard to calculate it. With that, she became a bit annoyed and her small face puffed up. Senior brother, since you think my calculation is wrong, then why don't you give me a counterexample? You're much smarter than me, so 10 billion, 100 billion are certainly calculated in the blink of an eye, right? Then tell me which number is wrong. What the hell, you're counterattacking me? Wang Lu had to sigh with emotion that mathematics really made people smart. This Lu Li actually learned the method of counterproof after calculating for a while. However, this was, after all, not a proper mathematical proof method. Wang Lu stretched out his hand wanting to touch Lu Li's head. However, the girl flung her head away and angrily said, "Senior brother, you're the most annoying." Wang Lu retracted his hand, gawked for a moment, and then laughed in spite of himself. At this time, arguing with a girl about scientific spirit and mathematical theorem must be out of his mind. The correct response should be, "Haha, I'm sorry I'm wrong. Lu Li, you've proved it very well. Come, this is your reward." From his mustard seed bag, Wang Lu took out a sparkling and translucent candy with rich spiritual energy. Lu Li's tears immediately turned into laughter and she happily enjoyed the candy. Wang Lu comforted his junior sister, but his heart was actually moved. Method of counterproof? This was actually a good way to solve the current impasse. I say, since you guys can't get a result, why don't you change to a simple method? Choose 7 pairs of parents and children, a total of 14 cards. Xingjing sect or our 3 sects will shuffle the cards. The other side will choose 7 of the cards, and the remaining 7 cards will be left to the person who shuffles the cards. What do you think? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.